All right. Guess what, everyone? It's a bonus episode. Oh, wait. I should
Right.
start the virtual camera so you can see what I'm pointing at as well.
Check out this mustache guy. This is a bonus episode.
This is a bonus episode about a man with a mustache. Today we're going to talk about Philadelphia architect Frank Furness. And to
Inventor of
help
the
us,
furnace.
inventor of the furnace and the furnace party.
That's right.
Yes. And
Hey, everybody,
to help us, we have June. Hi, June.
Yeah, hey, what's up?
we got June in because there's no Liam, because Liam has betrayed the revolution.
Yes.
As we always knew anarchists would. By not being here for the recording. I don't even remember where he is right now, but
I think he's at Disney World.
For fuck's sake.
Yeah, I know. Some people get to go to Disney World and some of us have to work.
Just stay home and do the hard graft of recording a, TBD hour podcast about Frank Furness.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that shit doesn't write itself.
I prefer that to going to the Magic Kingdom, I don't want to go
I think it's somewhere between going to the Magic Kingdom and going to Epcot. Because I'd rather be in Epcot. That sounds fun. Magic Kingdom sounds less fun because I don't like roller coasters or very many amusement park rides at all. But Epcot, I can go and pretend I'm somewhere else, like Norway or France. I could say France here because Liam's not here.
They've got a steam train at the Magic Kingdom, though, or maybe that's just Disneyland.
This is true.
You could ride the people transporter thing that they have there. That's cool.
The monorail is cool, yeah.
Yeah, you can just ride the monorail back and forth all day. That's the ride that you're interested in.
You can go to the Contemporary Resort and have waffles that aren't very good. At least they weren't that good when I was there. But you can watch the monorail go through the building, which is cool.
You could get arrested and go to like Disney World jail, and then get banned from Disney World, which would both save you from having to go to Disney World again, but also you would get a cool story out of it because you'd be like, yeah, one time I was in jail in Disney World.
They need to do like
YouTubers where they have the caption that's like exploring Disney World's infrastructure and services, Volume 2. I get arrested.
Yeah.
I need to like they should do like because Disney World is based around the worst cartoon character in history, Mickey Mouse, right? I think they need to do like a Looney Tunes themed Disney World equivalent.
Ooh, you could sort of dive off the highboard into a vault full of gold coins and like just break every bone in your body.
Get your photo taken with an anvil falling on you.
No, it's the Warner Brothers Tower where Yakko, Wacko, and Dot live, and then also the frog is there singing, but not for you.
And you can.
I think the answer is clear. When you ask me,
you can go to the gift shop and get a frog that only sings for you, and gradually be driven insane.
I would say, if you ask me, there has to be a cartoon that you base a theme park off of. It's the only one. Easy. It's a gimme. Venture Brothers. Give me. Venture World. Because that could exist in universe too. Like Jonas Venture Jr. could 100% build that. I guess that's just Brisbane land within Venture Brothers, but yeah, right. No, I would go for
that. I think you could do a really good Venture Brothers theme park with Spider Skull Island and the gated community where all the villains live.
Oh yeah, I said
Malice, right?
Yeah. A town called Malice. I swear to God, there's so many like nested references in that because it's like catnip. Me, but yeah, I want to go to Venture World. I want to buy a little plush helper, and
you want to go to the Venture Brothers version of Newark where the monarch lives.
Yes, yeah, I would be exactly the kind of person who goes to like a theme park cosplaying as a character that's in that theme park, and I would go as Dr. Mrs. the Monarch.
Who's among us? Yep.
All these great ideas, and what do they give us? Yeah, fucking Harry Potter world. Big whoop.
and And we're gonna get to this because we're talking about architecture today. But it's not even the right kind of Victorian Gothic they have at fucking Harry Potter World.
No.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Today's subject is architecture. Much like these cartoon characters we are talking about, we are going to talk about a cartoonish and larger than life character.
Yes.
Philadelphia architect Frank Furness.
The man who is half myth, half legend.
Yes.
The man who only ever shaved his chin and like both cheeks up to a point.
There was a while he didn't do that either. Anyway. All right, this is the first half of the presentation that June put together. So this is June's problem now.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Justin's going to talk about this one at the end.
Would this relate to the portion of our group chat earlier where we just sort of said she Eno on my Saarinen, she Frank Lloyd Wright, she Frank Lloyd on my right till I Falling Water or whatever?
Yeah.
That went on for like an hour too.
Mm-hmm.
She was really my Goldfinger. Oh no, I enjoyed it.
She Arrow on my Saarinen until I Gateway Arch.
That's the one. Yeah. Right. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about the underlying theorem here, but possibly as a thesis statement, possibly as an architectural kind of as a parallel to Strauss and Howe's generations theory. You have the Frank and Lou architectural theory.
Yes.
Through the course of American history, this is Justin's idea. Through the course of American architectural history, the generations of architecture can be broken down to roughly, categories that are roughly Franks and Lou's. You got your Frank Furnesses, you've got your Louis Sullivans, you've got your Frank Lloyd Wrights.
Your Frank Lloyd Wrights.
You've got your Louis Kahn.
And your Lou Kahns, yeah.
So
what are we due for now?
The thing is, it didn't. Okay, so we are now on Frank Gehry. We are waiting for the next Louis.
We await sort of like the Mahdi. We await a Louis or a Louis or like a Lou to come and like rescue American architecture from its benighted interregnum.
Well, the other thing is like the through line was much more direct until Lou Kahn, because Frank Furness was just Frank Furness, but Louis Sullivan worked in his office, and then Frank Lloyd Wright worked in Louis Sullivan's office.
Right.
And then there's this sort of disconnect with Lou Kahn, but Lou Kahn is from Philadelphia. He probably had some exposure to more than some exposure to Frank Furness. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more of it back then than there is now.
There's the monumentality, architectonic, weight, playing with kind of that defying weight with the way that you kind of apply form. There's a few things in that sort of frame, but I wanted to kind of throw
way too intellectual for a bonus episode.
I can't wait. That's going to be the whole fucking thing. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to say blocks of text that I got that I left grad school to start posting about. I'm just going to say those for 45 minutes at a time.
The listener gets, this is going to be the second bonus episode where you get a college credit for having listened to it all the way.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Right. And so that's the other thing that if only Liam were here, because this is actually he came up with the fucking term femboy brutalism, which is the best descriptor of a Frank Furness building that there possibly is. And we'll be getting to that as the course of the conversation progresses.
All right, well now you have my attention.
So, I think what you can see is that that connection between the four. And what Roz and I have attempted to do through our ability to learn about things or whatever is to try to give a little bit of a history, possibly through mostly talking about actual buildings, discussing the life, the legend of Frank Furness. And I think there's a really important thing where this whole Frank Louis paradigm of architecture, like Frank Furness is one of the first actual bombastic, obnoxious, starchitect architects. It's not just that he is making a ton of buildings, which he is, or that he's making very interesting buildings that get copied all over the United States. But he's the one who's really going out there in crazy outfits, telling everybody that they can go to hell if they don't appreciate what he does, and and really being a crazy person first and foremost as a kind of lead into your architecture practice. And I say that with a lot of love and affection and admiration, because these are truly the greatest buildings that I've ever seen. And
So
there really
when you
is
think of the stuff that like an architect, the stuff that annoys you about what you imagine when you imagine an architect now, that's his fault.
Exactly. The idea that the architect has to have their own personality, and that personality is tied to their buildings in this kind of way where, oh, the ideas that are coming out of this single person's vision, a lot of that is, that's all nonsense, right? Architecture firms are groups of workers, usually led by one horrible,
You're telling
one
me
business
Santiago
tyrant.
Calatrava isn't out there extruding all of that renderite by himself? He's like milking one giant sort of like renderite teat.
That would explain why it's so expensive, but
I would say there is a distinct contrast between, let's say, the Frank Furness mode of starchitecture versus the modern one, which is that Frank Furness doesn't try to couch anything in intellectual language.
Oh no.
He's just like, fuck you, it's a good idea.
Right. And so that anti-intellectualism is actually a big part of kind of, maybe this is a good segue to the next slide.
Yeah.
When we're talking, so Frank Furness grew up as the kind of anti-intellectual in the house full of intellectuals, right? His father was William Henry Furness, who came to Philadelphia from Boston to be the minister of the First Unitarian Church here.
Explain to me what Unitarianism is really quickly. That's like sort of Reddit Christianity of its day, right?
So there's this. There's a couple different ways to talk about it, and I think that the Unitarian is. I don't know Unitarianism specifically, but it's
not
a theological
something we're familiar
aspect.
with in the UK. So
right, so it's one of these American philosophical concepts that comes out of the 19th century, and I think that there's all these kind of Victorian ideals about how nature and individual experience wraps into your perception of either the natural world or spirituality or what have you. Unitarianism is wrapped up a lot in the transcendental mode of like transcendentalism and transcendental thinking, um, which again, I studied buildings, so I'm not a great scholar in a lot of this stuff.
It's a very like open form of Christianity, very open-minded form of Christianity.
Very based
I'm sorry I called it Reddit.
Yeah.
Unless it is Reddit, then I'm not.
Well, I mean, they were all this kind of I'm not an atheist, but also. So there is that. But Unitarianism and all of this kind of religious movement takes form in Philadelphia.
They denied the divinity of Christ. These my guys. All right. I'm not. I'm sorry I was down on them before.
Right. So William Henry Furness writes a big lecture that basically says, yeah, all that divine birth shit is bullshit. It was probably just something that got made up over time. And like, yeah, God is real or whatever, but I think we have more important problems like slavery right now. So he immediately becomes this kind of extremely polarizing figure. He knows, he writes all through the he's published all through the United States. Becomes a really important abolitionist. Is involved with Pennsylvania Hall in Philadelphia, which I think Justin, you know a lot about.
Yes, the earliest I think like physical building devoted to an abolitionist society. It was burned down in a riot 2 weeks after it was built, or I think even less than that, because well, there's still a lot of anti-abolitionist sentiment in Philadelphia at this point. I mean,
That's how you're onto something with an ideology. Is you build the building, it's like the whole time you're building it, you're getting like rocks thrown at the construction site, and then someone burns it down.
Yes.
Exactly. Now that's what I call ideology. Yeah, so the Furness family are these kind of outsiders in like the Philadelphia social scene generally, but because William Henry Furness is well known like throughout the country, they get all kinds of people who are coming through, right? So, oh God, who is it? Ralph Waldo Emerson was like William Furness's friend growing up, and so he was always at the house, hanging out at the dinner table.
The sort of Daryl
After
and
this,
Knives Out, sort of Daryl and Glass Onion of the Furness household. He's
yeah,
not part of the experience, but
right. So after the Sumner incident in 1856, which was when Preston Brooks beat Charles Sumner with a cane in the U.S. Senate in a debate over slavery. Charles Sumner stayed with the Furnaces all summer, so it was that kind of place where like he was constantly receiving visitors and guests who were doing all these kind of quote unquote important things or having shit happen to them, especially in the lead up to the Civil War and during the Civil War. Right, this is my problem. So all the kids in the house were really encouraged, like because of this kind of you have this Boston intellectual tradition that kind of pervades the house, and all the kids are encouraged to go to school, learn with tutors, go to Harvard, whatever.
Go to Harvard, yeah.
Yeah. So Horace Howard Furness is Frank Furness's brother, and the Shakespeare Library in DC is named after him, I believe.
No, it's named after a different guy,
right? Yeah,
Folger, yeah.
But before that, he was the preeminent scholar.
I gotta say, these guys are making my parents look like shit. Like they raised like 15,000 children entirely on the right side of history with like sort of liberal arts educations. My parents managed one podcaster,
Right. Yeah. I feel your feel on that as a daytime garbage woman. So Frank also felt that feel because like the Von Trapp children would run down the stairs, right? The oldest was a portrait painter, which is like the most civil kind of painting that you can do. It has like a purpose, and then
you can paint your dad and make him look like August and shit,
Yeah. And then like the German translator daughter comes down the stairs, and then Frank gets like hollered out to come down to dinner,
well,
and like
he can't
learn anything.
Us. He's still wearing the gaming headset.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like one of these things where it's like Frank was probably dyslexic or something like that. He had a lot of difficulty reading and writing, so like everybody was like, you're fucking dumb. Like, what the fuck are you gonna do around here? Like, that's how he was. He was the kind of the redheaded stepchild of the family, and he literally did have red hair. But I think
he did have red hair.
His family did have red hair. So yeah, he was some kind of small bean. But he was constantly present during all of these like very intellectual conversations. But also he had that. What this kind of imbued in him was that Philadelphia fuck you, alongside with like, yeah, I can be smart in my own different way, which is not the same as like a book or whatever. And he kind of carries that attitude throughout his life. And as part of this, I think they were trying to figuring out what kind of a career path might work for somebody like Frank.
Because professional gaming hadn't been invented yet.
Yes,
exactly. Gaming, Japanese art was really difficult to acquire in America.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just like one $300,000 body pillow in the US, and a guy keeps it in his vault,
Well, I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright went fucking bankrupt buying Japanese woodblock prints. So, like 3 or 4 times over.
Love those big titty woodblock prints.
Right.
Frank Lloyd Wright sitting like inexplicably in falling water. It's like 3 a.m. The only light on in the house is over his desk. He's like watching Spy Family, and he's like, yeah, he just like me, for real. I'm actually just like Lloyd Forger.
Right.
Frank Lloyd Forger. Fuck that. Okay. Yeah. New screen name.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is, this is basically right around the time period. The complication with architecture for the Furness family, right, is that in this time period, it's not really an academic discipline, right? The people who are practicing architecture in Philadelphia are builders. They maybe have like pattern books or access to pattern books that have these like, here's how to build a house instructions, and then figure out the kind of various construction techniques to put those things together. And so the preeminent kind of building that's happening, that's maybe considered architected in some kind of way, is this stuff by John Fraser, or other kind of like carpenter architects, right?
I see rich guy house, public building, public building.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all public buildings. Church, public building, church, public building, or school.
I don't know if the Union League is technically a public building.
Right. Yeah. So private. So the Union League. Yeah. What the fuck? I'm gonna get.
What is the Union League?
The Union League's a private club.
Yeah. The Union.
And it was started in. So these are all buildings by John Fraser. Because of the nature of this kind of building practice, it's very much not connected to a whole lot of specific examples, right? John Fraser becomes important. He gets taken up to be the architect of the Capitol, and that's when he stops working, like with Frank Furness in Philadelphia. But these are just some of the examples of his extant works that have been able to be identified. And yeah, it's the Union League's a private club that was started just before the Civil War to raise funds for the Union by Abraham Lincoln. There were Union Leagues all over the country. Of course, now it's metastasized into this Republican club in the contemporary sense of the word.
Yes.
Yeah, extremely cool. Right, and then that's the Old Pine Church on Pine Street. It's a neoclassical design. It's not exactly adhering to any specific architectural motif. It's a little bit Greek Revival. It's a little bit,
it's all practical, isn't it?
It's like very practical.
All of these are just like, so you want a like clubhouse, church, school, whatever. The guy shows up, he tells you what you should do, and then someone builds it. Like,
exactly, and like very little in terms of kind of flourish or complication in the design, if that makes sense, right? So these are very simple buildings. They're usually, sets of halls on either side.
I wouldn't call the Union League like a simple building and ornamentation. You got all that coining, you got the curved staircase, you got all the columns,
I'd say this one is nice.
Yeah.
Well, and don't forget that's a little bit later. Too, right? So the two on the right are a little bit earlier. Those are probably more coherent with like what would be happening in when Furness was in the office in 1857.
There's also like ideology happening. Like if you're doing the Union Club, that's a political statement. Whereas if you're just knocking up at like a school or whatever, nobody even really thought of like kids were people until like 1980 or whatever. So you could just do whatever.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then as now, the design of a high school is you got to have someone to like warehouse these little fuckers.
Wow, right. Another one of those prisons, as Michel Foucault pointed out.
Yeah. Michel Foucault, the most gifted practical architect of his day, had he gone into it, just be like, yeah, it's a box,
And if you make a building like the one on the lower right, the school, any more Greek Revival than it is, you get into the Girard College problem, where it's just like this box that's surrounded on all sides and is like a dark room. So
it doesn't actually work.
Yeah.
All of the kids sit in silence and like stare at this big statue of Zeus for like 16 years.
We're going to put the orphans in a dark room for the first 18 years of their life.
This is what the Habsburgs did. Like, and that's barely even a joke. Like, they famously all had like vitamin D deficiencies because like every royal child in like Spain or Austria, they just kept them out of the sunlight at all costs to keep that like sort of milky white skin.
Yeah, you gotta get that. You gotta get that sexy, real pale skin. For when you're the debutante.
Well, and look how they turned out. They turned out rich, so it's fine. So anyway, this is the kind of building that Frank Furness is used to. Like this is the kind of practice that he goes into as he starts to. This is the earliest kind of influence of a building that he's actually participating in the construction or the drawings of. Right? These are very simple, but they are very much weighty. They're heavy built. They look heavy. They look permanent. And I think that is the kind of Scottish influence, as far as I can tell. Like a lot of buildings in Edinburgh have the kind of more Union League look to them, right? Alice, at least in the 19th century during that time.
Yeah,
there's this kind of firmness.
Yeah, it's sort of stolid Presbyterian municipal stuff. You see a bunch of like Victorian schools here, for instance, that like the shell survives almost any attempt by anyone, including property developers, to do anything with it. And it just ends up as sort of like this burned out sort of like brick foundation with like, a bunch of construction fences around it that no one can do anything with. So yeah, these things are sort of like built to last in that respect.
Yeah, but they're not. Yeah, and so to that, they're simple buildings. They're heavy buildings, but as Frank is looking for some kind of actual deeper experience, he through his brother, I think, gets in touch with Richard Morris Hunt. Next slide, please. So this is when we start to have architecture.
Yeah, this is not just a building. This is a building that someone's thought about how it looks.
Right, and
what an idea! What a concept!
It's amazing. It's amazing what happens when a motherfucker goes to Paris for a couple years or whatever.
Oh God!
So unfortunately, so Richard Morris Hunt had studied in Paris and had taken the traditional school approach of Parisian architects, which had established some kind of artistic practice based off of the French Revolution. They had really formalized
curves.
Yeah, they really formalized
circles on it, so you can stamp a big N on there for whoever Napoleon is like emperor at the moment. Yes. It's a good time,
right? And so this is what's called today the Atelier, right? But we have to, of course, ask what is an atelier before we can answer the question of what was Richard Morris Hunt's atelier.
It's a pretentious way to say architecture firm. Next question.
pretentious way to say attic. Pretentious way to it's the like streetwear half of the company that makes Disco Elysium that always sells out of the like Kim Kitsuragi jacket before I can buy one. Yeah, that's what an atelier is.
Those are all really good answers. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, my pleasure. The thing is, right, if you're listening to this and you have the like orange Kim Kitsuragi jacket, I hate you on a personal level, like a really visceral one too. I'm gonna come to your house and I'm gonna take your jacket from you.
That's good to know. Yeah. So they have a bunch of those stupid jackets at this school, right?
They look really good. They look absolutely like fly as shit. It's like 1860. You're walking around with like an orange canvas bomber jacket.
The people who live in this building now, Alice, probably all have those jackets.
I'm sure.
Right. So this is up in New York. This is fuck. Did I not put in the notes? I forget what the name for this building is, but I think it's just the Atelier building or the fuck. Anyway,
let's mute my microphone while I type and let's find out.
Yeah, Alice, good luck finding it. But anyway, so Richard Morris Hunt goes to Paris. He studies at the École des Beaux-Arts, where he learns the kind of French method of building a large public building or a large, kind of a building bigger than a house, where you have this kind of symmetrical layout of rooms and there's this kind of procession through space and there's this understanding that there's the there's the kind of plan of the building, and that influences the elevation of the building, what you see from the street. And he's the first architect to actually have this kind of formalized training that then loops it back into traditional methods of construction in a more sophisticated way than just plonking down a building from a pattern book. So basically, he comes back to America. He opens up a
Artist
school.
Studio House, 51E West 10th Street, New York, New York.
Yeah, and I think it's still there. I'm pretty sure it's still there. And so this is effectively up on the third floor, the first architecture school in the United States that's actually teaching architects through a formalized training model that's not just an apprenticeship with a guy.
I hate to tell you, it no longer exists. It was raised in 1956 in order to make way for the apartment Peter Warren, an 11-story building.
That sounds kind of lame.
I'm striking out here.
Let's Google apartments Peter Warren at 45 West 10th Street. Oh, it looks bad. Oh, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, don't hurt yourself, Alice.
No, it's fine. It's got some like angular brickwork on there, but it doesn't. We'll have Dev put in a sort of spinning, rotating like news flash. This is what the Peter Warren Cooperative looks like, but it's not good.
Peter Warren?
Yeah. Whiskey Alpha Romeo Echo November Warren.
Huh.
It's kind of lame, yeah. And it's not bad, but it's not good. You know, considering the historical significance of what it replaced.
Yeah, it barely has any places to like put which Napoleon is in charge on there.
I was about to say, yeah.
Unless you want to like spray paint it on an air conditioner.
So Furness is here from 1858 to 1861, and then goes back, I think, to get ready to go out to war. But and I'm just gonna burn through this real quickly. During this time, this was really influential. Again, the classic Starchitect mode of talking is there are no precedents for my building type. I have thought of everything straight from my head, and it all comes exactly out just as it is. But these are some pretty clear influences that go through Frank Furness's work, not just the work of Richard Morris Hunt, but Hunt also introduces Frank Furness to the next slide, please. This is Henri Labrousse, Bibliothèque Saint-Gève.
Ooh, it's like the Baths of Trajan, but like fancy and for holding books in. I bet this has a bunch of places to tell you which Napoleon it is.
Exactly. This has so many places to tell you about all the Napoleons. So this is
one of the first public buildings to really feature exposed ironwork as part of the design.
Exactly. So this is a public library. It's in Paris, and it's a work of art that then gets to be known as Neo-Grec, which means like new Greek. Not exactly.
Get clawed by a cat, just.
I did. The pizza boy just walked all over me. He's getting antsy because he knows it's 45 minutes till it gets fed, and he wants it to happen sooner.
That cat is a monster.
Yeah. I like this building though. It's a beautiful little like slice of a wedding cake, and you know, one of my favorite cities in the world is Vienna, purely on the basis that I have this principle in my life that the more a building looks like a slice of delicious wedding cake, the more I want to be inside that building. And it's getting part of the way there, you know.
This was one of my favorites from architecture history class. Yeah.
This one is so it's just killer, right? It has like the perfect kind of blend of like the trad bullshit going on, but it's also like using modern materials to express how open and airy you can make things. And so this is kind of seen as like a really interesting way of approaching this kind of harmonizing the theory behind like, oh, we'll build old classical buildings and we'll do it in a modern and cool and interesting way by doing things like showing off the exposed ironwork, making this huge vault through the ceiling so there's this one big span of space instead of a bunch of very small, intimate spaces. And also there is an important thing, Alice, like the names of the like the names of the authors are on the outside of the building, which again, this is part of that kind of how architecture can kind of communicate its ideas. Oh yeah, the building is like a card file system, right? Like the building actually tells you what's happening on the inside, and it says that on the outside.
Yes, architecture parlons.
That's right, Roz. Spent all day going back through the notes.
Yeah.
God. So this is one kind of influence that Furness gets from Hunt. This kind of what's called Neo-Greek architecture, which then Furness plays with in his own way throughout his career. And the other very significant influence from this time period. Next slide, please. Is Viollet-le-Duc. Eugene Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc, who is I forget, was he the royal architect before he became like the imperial architect before he became the republic architect or whatever.
He was a lot of things.
He was a lot of things to a lot of people, and to Justin and me, and to a lesser extent Alice, he is the predecessor of Frank Furness, because he's actually, so he writes all these books, which Frank Furness doesn't read books, but they did find one copy of a Viollet-le-Duc book in the Frank Furness library.
He's like wandering around France, sort of like during its political turmoil, like hitting churches with hammers. Like they have all these like old abbeys and stuff, and this like weird guy shows up and he's like, "Yeah, let me just do a bunch of shit to your church." And it's like it's 1850 whatever. What are you gonna do about it? Fucking Les Miserables is happening in the background. You're gonna let that guy work on the church, and so that's what he does.
Right. Right, and he does great work. So I mean, does it really matter? So
most notably Notre Dame, I should say.
Yeah, he did the reconstruction of Notre Dame and a bunch of churches. So he's mostly doing these reconstructions in the built environment, but his books on architecture. This one's the one that's translated into English. It's called The Discourse. So we're doing discourses now.
Yeah, we're doing discourse right now.
Yeah, so page 1, how to construct kink at Pride.
Right. So what Viollet-le-Duc thinks about is there's this inherent difference with Victorian architecture versus classical or Roman Greek architecture. The Roman Greek architecture has the column, and that's your kind of simplest form of vertical height, and it tops out pretty low. The proportions of a column are like 8 tall to 1 width. Yeah, if you see that, yeah, everything's fixed. It's a ratio system.
Yeah, but, for guys who can't math good to build a building.
Yeah. Right. So if you can't math good to build a building, what you do is you're a Gothic architect, and you're just kind of figuring it out by stacking little cups on top of each other and then making a heavy thing and then practicing that until you figure out this kind of very thin structural system that's still made out of stone and is very kind of significantly strong and sturdy, but it's much thinner, and you can get much more light that penetrates through the building. So he basically says, fuck it, what if we're not doing it in stone? We're just going to do that stuff out of cast iron. Here's what some crazy shit might look like if we did these buildings out of cast iron. And then fills pages with these drawings of we'll just put a column wherever and have it do whatever. It'll project from the side of the building out into space, and then it'll just kind of rise up because we can do all that stuff with the expressive forms of iron now that we have.
You feel quite bad for Viollet-le-Duc because he's working for whichever Napoleon, right? And I keep coming back to Napoleons. I don't know why. I'm a little bit monomaniacal on Napoleons today, but one of the Napoleons is go into the the Saint-Chapelle or Saint-Denis or whatever, and put all of the faces back on the kings that the Republicans hacked off because it's the time for great reaction, right? Just do that. And so he goes and he does that, and the whole time he's in these weird ass Gothic buildings, thinking, yeah, but what if I applied all of the sort of the modern technology to try and achieve the same ends that these idiots who are just making it out of stone did? What if I did that? And Napoleon's just like, what? No, don't do that. I don't like when you do that because the reaction thing.
Right. So rather than get canceled by cancel culture, Viollet Leduc writes it all down in the discourse. He posts about it in the discourse.
Fanfic. He's like, this is how I would have done it had I been allowed to like get weird with it. This is what the Saint-Chapelle would look like.
Right. And then this is the one book that Frank Furness convinces himself that he has to read. And then he does this right before the Civil War happens.
It was
and then
pretty
he goes
easy because it was pretty easy because it was mostly pictures.
Look, he's like reading this sideways like Gaston.
It doesn't make it any easier. There's still a lot of words in these books. Trust me. I went to art history school.
Oh God, I don't like words.
It's too many words. It's just a couple, but it's too many. So anyway, that's when the war breaks out.
Yes. All right. So instead of completing his training, education, so on and so forth, Frank Furness has to go to the Civil War. Right. So we mentioned before, Furness family was staunchly abolitionists. They thought this was sort of this holy war against slavery, right? To the point where
you're not getting out of it then, even if you wanted to.
No.
Yeah, so like William Henry Furness even attended John Brown's funeral. Yeah,
so
but only Frank actually enlisted in the war though, because Horace was deaf, and I forget what happened to the other one.
He had like a wife and children. It says here on the notes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So here. Although I will say Horace decided to try and post through it to some extent, because at least Frank had never really shown any like political inclinations before, but Horace had this habit of, there were some local defenders or apologists for slavery in Philadelphia, and he would just mail them anonymously pictures of whipped slaves, and you say, you feel good about that?
I respect posting, but also I feel a deep kinship with anybody who like wants to go to the war, can't go to the war, tries to like fake their way through going to the war, and is told like, no, obviously you cannot go to the war, and like then decides to post. Why wouldn't I identify?
I'm gonna do some posts. Yeah. So in 1861, Frank Furness joins the I Company of the 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry, right, as a second lieutenant. He came in as an officer because he has, some connections, right? His cavalry was commanded by Colonel Richard Henry Rush. The cavalry was mostly volunteers. The officers are mostly college boys, right?
Yeah, you got some weird class divisions with like different volunteer formations of the Union Army. Like you had sort of like silk stocking regiments of like posh boys from New York, sort of forming infantry regiments and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those. Yeah.
Yeah,
it makes sense because cavalry is very fashionable, like then and for a long period before and to a certain extent afterwards. So it's good. You can sort of like dress up in your big tall boots and you can go to like dances and stuff.
Yeah. So,
well, it's important to note Rush's Lancers are the only ones that carried those. They were called Rush's Lancers because they literally carried lances. They carried medieval siege weapons.
Pain in the ass to do. Like
you're getting ahead of me, June.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So. Anyway, so all these folks, they're pretty enthusiastic about fighting, though. It's exciting. We're going to go to war. We're going to beat the Confederates. They'll be back by Christmas.
They've seen all of the like sort of Union wave posts, and they're like, we got like 90% of the railroads, like 95% of the factories. It's going to be over in like a month.
Yeah. So in November of that year, 1861, George McClellan sends Rush a letter. He says, "We're out of guns. Have you considered?"
Oh, Union procurement, my beloved. I mean, look. However bad it is, and on the Union side it's often very bad, just consider on the other side it's worse.
Yeah. It's like, we're out of guns. You considered arming the men with lances. Thus was created Russia's lancers, right? So the 6th Cavalry heads out to Hampton Roads. It was an arduous sea voyage, as I understand it, and somehow they passed by both the Monitor and the Merrimack.
Listen, you go to like a depth of more than 3 feet, you're going to pass by the Monitor. Like, they don't have a lot of sort of like freeboard to work with.
But you know what they're doing? They're going to the Peninsula Campaign. They're going to take Richmond from the south. So they get to Hampton Roads, Virginia, and they just sort of sit there.
Ladies and gentlemen, General George McClellan.
George McClellan is going to George McClellan this up, yeah.
McClellan writing to Lincoln, like, listen, and to be honest, here he has more of a point than his usual McClellanness when he's like, I don't really have guns. I got some of them with like lances here. You know, I'm a step away from longbows. That's more sort of justifiable than all of the other shit he ever did in his career, which amounts to, I like to stay where I am. I like to have all of my guys march up and down and like polish all of their brasses and stuff. And I don't like to attack the enemy very much.
Which is funny because that's sort of the opposite of how there's unfortunately the cartoon does not survive, but there is anecdotes of, you know, Frank Furness was doing these cartoons while he was in Company I, because, you know, he's got this artistic training. He does that. And, you know, when they found out they were going to have lances instead of guns, he was like, damn, look at all the people we're going to be able to spike, all these Confederates.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a cartoon of that.
Michael J. Lewis has the photos of them. I've seen them before. They're really good.
Oh.
They're really funny.
They're not in the books.
No.
Just do your best to like John Madden a guy on a horse skewering a guy.
Skewering the guy, skewering several guys.
Just put some guys on the lances.
Because they'd have sabers where you could only skewer one guy. Frank's point is they could now skewer several guys.
So reminded unbidden that the sort of Napoleonic Grande Armée slang for a bayonet charge was déjeuner à la fourchette. Like, you know, like breakfast on a fork, right? Because you're like skewering a guy. Sort of skewering involved in like 19th century warfare.
So McClellan finally gets this damn Peninsula Campaign going. They're going to advance on Richmond down the peninsula off the Chesapeake Bay. That's between the York River and the what's the other one?
Ohio?
The James. You know, and they're going to head up towards Richmond. And of course, you know, he had no idea how to use cavalry, right?
No.
And it showed. A lot of what their company wound up doing was like guarding the quarters of officers and stuff like that.
What?
Yeah. Real boring.
You got into this for the skewering. You barely get to skewer anyone.
Oh, don't worry. They see some combat later. So they managed to skip the horrible defeat at Chancellorsville, right? Because they were employed instead on Stoneman's raid, where they sort of swept around the back of the Confederate lines and burned everything they could, hopefully to sever the Orange and Alexandria Railroad at Gordonsville, right? This is all in Virginia. Now, Major General George Stoneman thought it would draw out the rebels' cavalry and force them into this fruitless chase, which would allow the Union infantry a fighting chance against rebel infantry. But the thing is, General Lee was like, yeah, we don't care about those guys. And they sent all his cavalry to fuck up the Union infantry rather than deal with the 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry. So, you know, that one didn't work.
Yeah, the thing is, if I was subject to a diversionary raid, I would simply ignore it.
Yes. Yeah, as it turns out.
Yeah, I don't like Lee. I have, you know, sort of less respect for his generalship than a lot of sort of you know, readers of history likers. But in this instance, I'm afraid you do have to hand it to him. To just be like, no, no, thank you. I don't believe in any of that shit.
Yeah, I don't mind. That's not real. Frank Furness, though, he had an issue, which was that, you know, he had the architecture brain. He knew a bunch about logistics and stuff like that. So he winds up being assigned as aide de camp to General Stoneman. He's good at logistics and stuff. And one of the things which is sort of noted throughout this campaign is that camps where Frank Furness was in charge tended to be a little better built, a little nicer.
Yeah.
He's putting curlicues on the tents and stuff,
Yeah. But Stoneman fucked up badly enough that his health declined. He had to relinquish command. He was replaced by Alfred Pleasanton, right? Furness was then reassigned to Company F, which was commanded by Captain Charles Davis. Richard Henry Rush was replaced by Major Robert Morris Jr. They took away the lances. They gave them Sharps carbines. The type of gun.
Okay, now we're getting into it.
Yeah. So Company F winds up at the Battle of Brandy Station. I'm not sure quite where that is. I'm not a Civil War expert. But they wind up riding right up to the Confederate lines, have a nasty bit of hand-to-hand combat around some artillery pieces. They wind up having to use the sabers and stuff. They suffer some pretty heavy losses.
Yeah, I mean, Brandy Station, it's difficult because fucking everything in the Civil War is called Brandy something. Because like all of these are happening around hamlets that are like named like Dick's Bullshit Hamlet or like Brandy Station or like Brandy Wine or whatever. This is like the big cavalry on cavalry engagement. So like sets up the beginning of the Gettysburg campaign. And yeah, not great. There's a lot of sort of like nasty places to be in the Civil War, but like cavalry in battle, again, particularly not one of them. It's the kind of thing where you get like 4 horses shot out from under you in an afternoon, sort of thing.
Yeah, and also important point here is that Frank Furness is now first lieutenant Frank Furness, not second lieutenant, when he gets reassigned to Company F. Now, Confederate cavalry start to surround them, but that cavalry was cut off by another Union regiment, right? But when the dust settled, 140 men, including Captain Davis, were dead, and Major Morris Jr. had been captured. So now Captain Frank Furness took the lead of Company F.
Oh yeah, and at this point, the field is like strewn with like dead guys, dead horses, all this.
Oh yeah,
because like your typical civil union, your typical like Civil War use of cavalry is like de facto dragoons. You ride to the battle, you get off the horse, you fight as infantry. Whereas these guys manage to like stay on the horse the whole time, and it sort of looks like fucking I don't even know what, but it looks bad.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was at this battle. At least one battle, Frank had his horse shot out from under him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, you did sort of occupational hazard by far. But,
yes. More of a hazard for the horse, I think, because it dies.
Well, listen, it's only a hazard for the horse once.
This is true, yeah.
Right.
Eventually, his unit makes it up to Gettysburg. They held him in reserve for 2 days because they were like the reserve forces, right? But the Lancers were eventually sent out to hold off a division of Confederate troops who were set to support Pickett's charge. This wound up as a sort of nasty but successful skirmish that prevented Pickett's charge from being more successful than it was, which, as far as I know, Pickett's charge didn't work, right?
No.
No, that's what I thought.
Famously deadly. And
okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Now, the tide of the war was turning at this point. There's still time for our boys in blue to fuck up, though, right?
I know exactly which battle you're going to tell me about.
So
I like Grant. I like Grant a lot, right? But the problem with America is that, like, it wins like America, which is to say that it does the Battle of Cold Harbor.
Yes. The Lancers find themselves at the Battle of Cold Harbor, wherein General Grant sent wave after wave of his men to attack the Confederate killbots until they reached their predetermined kill limit.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for it whatsoever. It's just purely all they have to do. All he has to do is just entrench. He's like outside of Richmond, and the only thing that's on the line is like how much longer the war lasts in terms of like weeks or months, right? And all he has to do is just sit there and like kill people, and that's what he does. And like it works very well because it's easy to do. It's like it's such an unforced error.
Yeah, it's and it's like the sort of shades of World War I to come. There's like an actual no man's land and all this stuff.
Absolutely. You look at like sieges of Richmond, sieges of Vicksburg. There's you can absolutely see sort of like the phantasms of World War I in them.
Yeah, and this is the first time Frank Furness does something noble but stupid. Which is, just across the Union barricades, a Confederate attacker was slowly and agonizingly bleeding out. And he was just like, this is, again, it's a bad situation, this battle. No one had managed to sort of retrieve the dead and the wounded. And, eventually he's just like, I can't stand to see this man suffering because he'd been limping up and down. He's hold on, this is from page 48 in the book where he explains it. One of the books.
It's good. It's good officering as well because it's gonna like fuck up your men. And like if you yourself are getting rattled by it, but like the sort of the laws of war very much not a thing in the Civil War. Sort of Andersonville testifies to that. So the done thing, right? If the guy is bothering you as you shoot him, right? Like
yeah, this is true. He said, what moved my pity more than in the countless other cases which we almost daily witnessed was that when the poor fellow was struck, believing himself near death, he tried to struggle to his knees and clasped his hands upright in prayer. What man with memories of bedtime and his mother's gentle hand would see that sight unmoved? What he wound up doing was climbing over the barricades and crawling through the no man's land and applying a tourniquet to the man's leg where he was bleeding out.
Yeah, and then that's the soldier that he meets with years later, right?
I'm not sure. The book says we don't know what happened to that soldier.
Okay, then that was a Trevelyan Station.
This is Architecture in the Violent Mind by Michael J. Lewis, by the way. So no one even bothers trying to shoot at him. This is one of those old fashioned chivalry things, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I mean, also bear in mind, I think probably in terms of military history, one of the quotes that I keep coming back to is when I think it was Sword Beach on D-Day, the British landed at it. They brought a bagpiper with them. And they interviewed one of the German sort of like machine gunners after the fact, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we saw the guy marching up and down with the bagpipes. We didn't shoot him because we thought he was crazy. Like, like we thought he had gone mad, so we didn't shoot him because it felt unfair." I think that's sort of like perhaps the same vibe. I don't know.
Well, in that vein, what gets him the Medal of Honor is the Battle of Trevelyan Station. Right.
Say. Medal of Honor, not as big of a deal in the Civil War because it was the only one the Army gave you, more or less.
They still had a lot of room in Arlington Cemetery back then. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, there was all the room because Arlington Cemetery was Robert E. Lee's plantation.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, to make sort of a long story short here, the Cavalry Corps intended to cut the Virginia Central Railroad at Trevelyan Station, right? They encountered Confederate cavalry, and the fighting eventually progressed to this point where the Confederates held a farmhouse and the Union held its outbuildings, right? Company C sent a man out to crawl on hands and knees to keep out of view of the Confederates to report to Captain Furness that they were out of ammunition, and if the position fell, it might jeopardize the whole operation. So Frank Furness, he's got this large and impressive logistical and architectural head, and he decided to use his head, right? Which is, what if he put the box of ammo on his head and just sprinted over there?
Yeah, just gonna take the thing that explodes, put it as close as possible in my head, just give it a shot.
That's going to be a heavy box of ammunition, too.
Yes. So he and Captain Walsh Mitchell both grabbed a box of ammo and just did that. They just sprinted over, gave him the ammo. Then they then they sprinted back. We don't know what the Confederates thought of this, but they were confused and surprised enough that when they did the first pass, there wasn't that much gunfire. It's like, what are these idiots doing? They're officers.
Just imagine calling timeout on the battlefield.
And on our way back, they got shot at a whole lot more. Someone managed to put a bullet through Walsh Mitchell's hat.
The only way that makes sense to me, if it's cavalry, it makes sense to me that that's like a hardy hat, so it's like a big fucking cowboy hat looking thing. But that's pretty prominent too. It's got like a sort of a gold like cord on it and everything. Like,
Jesus. It's the most prominent target imaginable. So anyway, this is one of the most incredibly stupid things imaginable, and it worked flawlessly. They were able to hold the position.
I love military history.
The battle
you just get to like the sort of the history of the engagement, and then this guy, sort of blue link with a named person, decided to like go off.
Yeah. Yeah, fuck it, let's do it.
Yeah, and this is widely regarded, like that was a suicide mission. There's no chance that it was gonna work. Like, it's very confusing.
It's one of those things that you would discourage now on the basis that you're too important to get killed for that. Like, ideally, you want to avoid getting killed at all, but in particular, you send a guy for that, you know?
Yeah.
Right, and it's like I think a couple different historians, but I know Mike Lewis points to this incident as like, oh no, the motherfucker was like trying to die out there. Like every once in a while, he was just like looking for an opportunity. But he failed the skill issue.
It didn't quite get himself killed. Now, in fact, didn't even get a scratch on him. So, you know, the battle itself had mixed results. I don't know if you could say Trevilian Station was a victory for the Union. They did destroy the railroad, but it was back up and running in 2 weeks. But also the war was like winding down. So everyone saw this was not going good places for the Confederates. But at this point, this is late in the war. The original recruits for the Lancers had about 3 months left. They went to go fight in the Shenandoah Valley, right? Eventually, they got caught up to by Mosby's raiders. And Mosby's raiders took out most of their supplies and then most of the records of the unit, right? Which is why we don't know.
Confederate cavalry. I mean, this is like Nathan Bedford Forrest's shit, too. It was the original recruiting base of the first Klan. Fucking assholes. Some of the worst war criminals in the war, incidentally.
They took out most of the records, and Frank Furness actually wound up at this point with a desk job in Washington, D.C., trying to put those records back together. But then, you know, his term of enlistment ended October 4th, 1863, and he decided to go back to Philadelphia, trade in the lance for the T-square and compass. He was going to go back to architecture.
He was going to return to Philadelphia.
Yeah, after some time off doing nice, relaxing stuff like fighting the Civil War, he was deciding to go back to the real cut and thrust of architecture.
Well, he goes back for about 2 years, and then he spends another year at Richard Morris Hunt's atelier before going into like actual private practice. That's a gap in resume, though.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting anecdote here from the Frank Furness Architecture and the Violent Mind book, which is he learned to swear at Hunt's office and then actually use that to maintain military discipline more effectively than he would have otherwise.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, that book is full of just the best little asides and quotes. Right. Do you want to Oh, show off the next slide, Ross.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a picture here of the Lancers with their lances. Our boy Frank is right here. He was at this point captain of F Company, but this is him with I Company, which he liked better.
Just doing epic troop shit, you know?
Yes. And then
Right.
on the previous slide is actually the monument at Gettysburg that he designed for his own unit. You can see they got the lances here, even though they weren't using them by that point.
Right. Though I mean, those
them.
are ironwork. You know,
Yeah.
They were definitely emblematic of the troop, but the flag part of those flags is actually metal. Oh, and then yeah. So there's that slide of the company, and then that's like a Harper's illustration. Just showing them all.
Just like, yeah, we didn't have enough guns, but we had more guns than the other guys.
Yeah.
Right.
And in hindsight, quite a fashionable regiment, you know.
Yes. Very anachronistic. It's very fun.
It's really funny, yeah. And so like I like to think I don't know exactly what it is.
Zouaves at some point, my favorite anachronism of the Civil War, because motherfuckers loved a Zouave. And yeah, that's a whole story in itself.
I've just had my microphone taken away by Pizza Boy. I got it back though.
He's excited to talk about Zouaves.
Yes.
The other important thing, yeah, right. So Frank Furness enters the war, or I think on the left is a picture when he's like about 20, like maybe in the late 1850s, early 1860s. The one on the right is when he comes back, and he looks like Roz after like a 6-week bender. He's drunk and mad. He also has a gun now. Like, yes. and so there's all these stories that just about like what working at his office was like, right? So he comes out of like the war in Richard Morrison's office swearing like crazy. His office was at the end of the hall, and he had a like a was it like a deer head or something, or was it a target? He would shoot the far end of the far end for practice.
There was a target on the back of the elevator shaft, I believe, is the story. He painted a target on the back of the elevator shaft, and he would shoot at it when he was annoyed.
Yeah, I won't say that a sort of like national PTSD is a good thing, right? I won't say that, but it leads you to some entertaining places, and tracing the trajectories of like all of these Civil War guys as they come out of the war into their new thing. Like the Civil War made Ambrose Bierce a goth. Like it turned him into a goth girl. People really got weird with it, because like after you've seen all of this shit, after you've seen the sort of like horrors that prefigure World War One, you know, people like fucking stumbling around with their guts hanging out and shit, you realize you can just do whatever you want. Laws are fake, and you can kill anyone who tries to stop you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Frank Furness embraced that with aplomb, and not only that, he did all of those things. He wore the loudest plaids that he could find, was specifically what was said about him. Like that image on the right, you can't see it, but he is wearing a checkered plaid suit. The other, he would shoot the gun, and so interns and the draftsmen in the office had to be careful when they were crossing the hall to check both ways first.
And to my knowledge, no accidents, so I guess the system worked.
They don't.
This is the thing, right? The laws of firearm safety, right, hadn't been formulated yet, but I think Frank Furness had like come up with a like a workaround for them, which is, you know, if the first rule of firearms is like assume all firearms are loaded, the second one is like never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to destroy. Well, that second one you don't have to worry about if you're willing to destroy everything.
One quote from the book that was like, well, Frank Furness had probably destroyed more buildings at this point than he would ever build.
God. So the other important thing is that he comes out of the war and the Russia's Lancers group with like a stacked Rolodex of people who either went on to become Philadelphia industrial merchants, or a couple people who were like, the 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 wealthy kid from a wealthy family in Philadelphia. So he came out of the war with like a huge black book of new new people to get some kind of commission from later in life. And that was the other really important thing from the war, was that he milked the hell out of all of those people that he met, and did really really impressive work for them. But we'll be getting to that in due time, because we have to take a quick a quick sidebar into religious architecture. I think that's probably the thematic start of our uh, journey back to architecture school. Right.
What the fuck is this? He built them a mosque?
yeah. He built the Jews a mosque for doing temple.
He built a Christian mosque for the Jews. Yes.
Yeah, he built. Yeah, it's actually a cathedral with mosque informed elements.
It's got a plaque on it, like fucking Westminster. That's incredible.
Right. So the one on the left is the Germantown Unitarian Church. It's from 1866. It's the first commission that his firm actually does. He partners up with that guy John Fraser, and also George Hewitt, who goes on to design. George Hewitt really takes on the like architectural practice around churches and religious buildings a lot of the time. But so you have these very like academic. You have this like very academic example of like a Gothic church. It's literally something out of like a Pugin, Augustus Pugin something or other. But
yeah, like it slips off the page next to his second one. Like it's fine, but it's like
no, you didn't even notice it.
No.
Right. Normal. So right. So there's normal ass church, and then his friends or his dad's friend.
There's a normal ass church, and then there's a very normal church.
Right. Right. So in 1868, that's when Rodef Shalom Synagogue on the right gets constructed. The rabbi's name is Marcus Jastrow, and he was a friend of William Henry Furness, right? Because of this, hey, you're not exactly Catholic in this city. Let's get together and hang out and talk about stuff that's like interesting. And also, Jastrow was very progressive as a rabbi, so he was kind of in the same milieu.
Reform Judaism at this point as like an actual thing, as opposed to like handfuls of guys, is only what, like 20, 30 years old, right? So this is, novel in all sorts of ways.
Right. And I don't know enough about the history of it, but there is, significant the congregation of Rodef Shalom is very similar to the people who are, these kind of new industrialists in Philadelphia. They're a lot of wealth, a lot of this is a huge building campaign to put something like this up. And you see kind of, if you go to the next slide, this is just Rodef Shalom. So those photos on the right or on the left are from the interior. It was demolished to make way for an even cooler building, so that's kind of cool. But you can see here Rodef Shalom.
Oh,
Broad and Green. The new one's like a different Byzantine church, or Byzantine structure, but it's much more. It's just it doesn't look like a church. Though. Also, it's incredible.
So there's like 50 different things going on here, but the first one is my guy really likes sort of Andalusian forms, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got the like I don't remember the name of the arch, but what's sort of like the circular arch at the top over a doorway. You've got the like weird minaret, I can only describe it as. You've got the like the ablak, the like alternating bands of like red and white stone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a it's really striking.
Right. And so this is the thing, like you can see some of the influences, but you immediately also see like, oh, there's 30 or 40 different things going on, right? And this is the first place. Yeah, they've got the horseshoe arches, but even the minaret looking thing almost looks like it's from like it's from like a Venetian Gothic building or something out of Florence, right? It looks like a baptistry. So it's all these things kind of working together, and then the furniture too. He designs all the furniture that we still have in the building, and that incorporates all of these kind of non-referential flowers alongside with these things where it's like, yeah, we're referencing parts of the building that are on the outside of the building, but it's furniture. The whole place is just really, you can see the beginning of it, right? And then that kind of mode of architecture is they call it Moorish in that time period because a lot of it is based specifically on the Alhambra. But
yeah, I went to Andalusian, so I feel very gratified. That I was right.
Yeah. And so what's up?
One thing I'm noticing here is he's done Moorish motifs on a hammer beam roof.
Right?
Yeah.
And then he got that onion dome too.
He's put this dome on there as well, like,
yeah,
which is sort of Islamic, but not in a form that I remember seeing anywhere.
No, it's like an onion dome from St. Peter's in Russia.
It's sort of like half and half, sort of like Russian. It's like something you'd see in like Bukhara or something. It's weird as hell.
We're not doing as good as Frank here. We need to get a Russian Orthodox guy on the podcast now.
Yeah, that's right.
A Christian, it's a Muslim church built for the Jews. That is our podcast.
So the next slide's another good example of this kind of like, you can see that obvious what's called Moorish or like Neo-Islamic, and that influence pervasive. This is a pavilion for the 1876 Centennial Exposition. It's the Brazilian Pavilion.
It's the Brazilian Pavilion, and it cost $1 million. It didn't cost that much. That was way too much money back then, but I thought it'd be funny.
It cost a lot of money though. It was a nice building.
Surprisingly compromising. I'm starting a great architectural tradition of compromising your principles, because Brazil didn't abolish slavery until 1899.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
I mean, there's a lot that has been written about like World's Fairs and borrowing from other cultures, stealing from other cultures, just straight up appropriating shit, right? This is a perfect example of that. But you see how it's got that same kind of form, but it really is trying to pull those elements out and just use them as those processional arches that frame the space. And you can see kind of all the different areas where just oversized ornament has really been applied to kind of play up that.
The traditional Brazilian Islamic fortress. I mean, this is what this is what Bolsonaro thinks the Altiplano is going to look like in like a year's time after Lula's back in.
Yeah, this whole thing was also like gilded and had a bunch of the like very vivid green paint and a bunch of the very vivid red paint on it. Like this whole thing was like polychrome barely describes it. Like it was just a crazy decorated color scheme.
This is like one of the first things that gets him like national attention, because he's done this pavilion which Brazil shelled out a lot of money for. I mean, Emperor Pedro II came to visit it and everything. And he starts on developing his style of extremely weird stuff.
Right. This is where it's like, yeah. So these images show up in the books of pictures that you would buy at the Centennial to bring back to show people that you went. And in those photo scrapbooks, it would have Frank Furness's Brazilian Pavilion. So these really did get all the way around the United States.
Just a really fun phrase to say,
Yes.
It would be it would be a good kids
Brazilian
show.
Exposition Pavilion, yeah.
So then like a bunch of his like most important commissions happen right around this 1875-76 period, preparing for the Centennial, and then all these kinds of things that were happening in construction. Like there were a bunch of these contests that were occurring at the same time in Philadelphia for large buildings. He was chosen to do POF, the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. Next slide, please.
Yes.
You can see that it's a very similar kind of massing to the Brazilian pavilion, right? You got the tall piece, you got the two side pieces, you've got these entrances.
Yeah.
Did Frank Furness know that, like, if he had wanted to, he could have been Muslim? Like, he didn't. was he aware of this, or was he just like the people who at me? That's like, well, how are you Muslim and white? Like,
I'm pretty sure the rules were stricter back then.
maybe he was, and he just didn't tell anyone. You know, decent chance, I would say.
We will have to find out if he recited the Shahada on his.
Yeah, unhesitatingly. Yeah. Even now, his spirit. You know, I did, but like. Yeah, no, it once again, it's looking Muslim to me.
Well, these ones
entirely,
really do.
Not exclusively, but like
a lot of these really do look very that quote unquote Islamic. Sometimes it's from like a Venetian Gothic kind of reference point, which is what John Ruskin was really heavily promoting in his architectural treatises. They borrow all sorts of details, right? Like those little inset like bas relief panels are very those are like Renaissance details, you know. And then there's all the neo-Grec stuff where it's like those big circles are references to classical architecture, and those will show up all over the place. But this is really just like a pure mismatch. And it's a pure mismatch because the underlying structure of the building, which has this very complicated program to it, it's partially studios and places where people learn how to do art or can look at a naked woman, and that's very scary for artists during this time period. This was a school where they were doing that, and a lot of people got in trouble for it.
For those who are not initiated, the program is a word architects use to say what the building is supposed to do.
Right. Thanks, Roz. I'm gonna do that a lot. So actually, wait. If you go to the next, right. So if you go to the next slide, that's actually there's a plan of the building up in the corner.
It's again, like you look at this and you can pick out the one thing that like he's decided to take and then make weirder. This is Saint-Chapelle. He's just like he's looked at the inside of the Saint-Chapelle and he's gone, okay, what if I like did a bunch of other stuff on top of it?
Made it weirder. This building is an incredible experience. Just the way the space is used. You come in through this like sort of narrow space, you climb the stairs, all of a sudden you're in this room with this weird wall treatment. It's incredible.
Yeah,
you got all the columns and stuff.
And it's a short building because there's skylights everywhere, right? You need to have a ton of natural light for both looking at art or doing art. And so this building has skylights pretty much in every surface.
That is the other thing is that during the daytime, if you visit here, you go from a light space, which is outside, to a dark and confined space, back to a large and light space.
Right, and it's one of these interiors. Right, so like that photo in the upper right is pretty true. Like the lights are on all the time, in those little like outdoor looking light globes. If you go to the next slide, all of these things were also individually designed, right? So those light globes or the lampposts are up in the upper right, and they have all these like stringy details on them, spiky details. The building's full of modern elements, like truly modern things too. Like so, Viollet-le-Duc could only theorize about putting the iron on the building. Frank Furness is actually making cast iron columns and putting them on the building.
And all this technology, steel beams, just exposed steel beams.
Yeah.
With a little bit of ornament on them.
Yeah, this building was not a concern for airplanes. The air conditioning is also integrated into these columns. So there's all these like technological, really, really modern and forward-thinking technological things happening alongside of this real commitment to making the space work for these two separate uses, both as a place for displaying art and then a place for making art.
So it would be just heating at the time. It wouldn't be air conditioning.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think this is right around they start to do some things with
Carrier
ventilation.
didn't okay, so maybe because Mark Twain had like central heating, but he didn't have air conditioning. So you had like sort of this primitive forced air system that I think was possible at the time. It wouldn't have been radiators,
it was probably something like that. Yeah,
but you would not have any cooling capability.
Okay.
I know it smells crazy in there.
I'm gonna have to double check because there maybe it's simply ventilation places for some kind of.
Find out first modern electrical air conditioning unit 1901.
Okay.
Yeah, this is well before that.
Yeah, this would be a non-modern air conditioning unit. But anyway,
you could maybe use like ice, like I mean,
giant block of ice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really don't know off the top of my head. But yeah, this whole building is crazy. I think that's about all I can coherently say about it.
I really like
if you can go.
It's a really good building. Yeah.
Oh, there's a bunch of this is one of the first buildings where sandblasting is used as part of the architectural ornament. You can see it in that center image in the like the side of the staircase. There's that repeating pattern of the flowers that's in there. That was all sandblasted in. So it's you're not having people carving stone at this point. It's like a modern mode of production. You have these columns that almost look like they're pistons. It's a really incredible space.
It's very dynamic, you might say, and it's very industrial. It's one of these things where you sort of there's this concept of traditional architecture, and it's like this sort of Victorian bullshit, but a lot of that was sort of backward thinking. This is very forward thinking,
Right.
Frank is doing stuff that no one's ever done before because he hasn't figured out how to read a book.
Aside, of course, from the Quran.
Yes.
That and Viollet-le-Duc's picture book.
Yeah, he can read pictures pretty good, just like me. So, like I said, this period, there's a bunch of commissions that come through, and this is really when he's starting to make a name for himself. This is one of my favorites. This is the Guarantee Safe Deposit Company. You can see in that postcard image on,
This is my favorite sort of like phase of his career. Is sort of perfectly oblivious, nice bank manager going, "Yeah, we need a new bank." Frank Furness, sort of fresh off of like firing a shitload of like rounds out of a revolver into the back of his own lift shaft, going, "I'll give you a fucking bank."
Yeah.
You want a bank? I'm going to give you a bank the likes of which you've never seen.
Yeah,
I was at Cold Harbor, bitch. Good chance the bank manager was too.
Different ways of coping. Some people open safety deposit companies to cope. Some people create a sort of strange Cordovan sort of like storehouses.
Also, look at how big the people are. Look at how big the people are in the photo, and look at how big the people are in the postcard. The building is actually that big.
What I really like is the font on this thing, on this advertisement here. That's very fun. And there's a lot of I think we got a couple more in this presentation where you have this sort of late Victorian font thing going on with these advertisements. It's fun.
Yeah. So this is a person. I just love this building so much. You can see that it's in like a very interesting spot in the city. Carpenter's Hall, which is a historic site, is just like in the alleyway behind here. That one postcard has a picture of it. But this is really where the banking.
And then right next to this would have been the second bank of the United States, right?
Is that the second bank? It's in that complex, but I think it's on the other. It's around the corner. Yeah.
The famously easy to 3D model and texture Second Bank of the United States.
Second Bank of the United States. Yeah.
It's a good building. So yeah, this
Wish
whole
someone
and
would make a video about it and its sisters.
Probably not.
We're not going there.
Let's not go there. Not today.
So, but so there's this form of a banking hall that starts to get developed. There's a kind of coherent form of these banks that they end up taking. It's not that interesting, so I won't talk about it. But the coolest bank,
the big hall of money that makes you psychologically like you go in the building and the building says to you, "You don't want to rob me. You don't want to rob me so bad."
Yeah.
There's no possible way you could possibly rob me. So if you go to the next slide, you see the interior of what's known as like the apotheosis or whatever of Frank Furness Banks. This is the Provident Life and Trust Company.
Yeah, this is like the one the critics are like, this is the best one.
Hard to blame them. Fucking look at that thing. Even when it was 100 years old, it was goth as hell and totally amazing.
He made a goth temple of money, and then the city of Philadelphia decided to never clean it to make it more goth.
Yes.
Yeah. God.
I love the vault on the like balcony too. Just like you can see where the money is. Can you get to it? No.
Well, I believe the balcony was actually added later. That was not part of the original design, but that is pretty funny though.
Yeah.
Just like a sort of a scheme to taunt the John Dillingers of this world to be like, you want this? You want this? Huh? I'm dangling a big sack of cash off the balcony on a fishing rod.
So that's how the banking hall. That was one of the things about it is there's the second floor balcony in the back where the clerk works, the person who's in charge, and that is where the vault like is in some way, shape, or form, whether it's on the second floor, first floor, whatever. And it was very much that I'm watching everything that happens here. I'm overseeing the entire bank and making sure all the money goes out. But you can see it's just a box. It's a very big box with a big skylight.
An interesting sort of like coffered sort of roof thing.
When you got the facade is where you sort of see Frank Furness is like really inverting a lot of generally accepted rules about architecture. Like, for instance, the heaviest part of the building is at the top,
right
at the bottom. Comes up with there are columns. They're very short.
It has something of the possible interesting future bonus episode Nicholas Hawksmoor about it, right?
Ooh,
it might be John Hawksmoor, I don't remember, but it has something of the Hawksmoor Church about it. You know, the one in Whitechapel that looks like it's about to fall on you.
Exactly.
It's sort of like mildly terrifying, slightly, satanic. It looks a bit like the sort of someone fed an AI in the prompt, show me the skull of Sam the Eagle. It's weird.
It's a weird building. It's really good.
It's so good. It's so good.
You got to think, look in this postcard at the building next door to it, which is 4 stories tall and like goes up 2/3 of the height of this, which is basically a 2-story building.
Meet your new neighbor, the Egyptolonian sort of like ziggurat bank company.
Yeah, this is the hard part about Frank Furness is like, well, can we assign this some sort of style? And your mind just starts short circuiting at that point.
Yeah, right. Because this has all the same things, right? It's got that weird kind of vaguely Islamic arch over the doorway. It's got that 3-way, that 3-part entrance. It's just so good.
Do people have like any sort of like? There have to be people who think that this art is like conspiratorial in nature, right? Because there's a bunch of architecture that is like I live in a city where the big cemetery is one big sort of Masonic allegory. There have to be people who like have looked at this and been like, this is like Denver International Airport, but 19th century. Frank Furness is sending me messages through my fillings.
Well, it got demolished, so no.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to like gin up a retrospective conspiracy theory about this one,
we didn't get into the good era of conspiracy by the time that most of Frank Furness's work was torn down for one reason or another.
It was a more innocent time when people were just like, yeah, no, that's just a crazy guy.
It's just a crazy guy.
Yeah, it was before MK Ultra was really going.
Yeah, he forgot how to do architecture because of the Civil War, and so he just made this weird building.
The Civil War was the original MK Ultra.
Right. Oh yeah, no, the original version of this
send you through Cold Harbor.
Yeah. Well, remember us. The original version of this was supposed to be much like how modernism, modernism is a direct result of the horrors of World War One. This building is a direct result of the horrors of the Civil War.
Yeah,
it's indescribable in its conceptualization.
Yeah, you know what it is? It's like not enough architects like had the Civil War experience Frank Furness did. And if they had, this would have been like a movement, perhaps.
Seriously.
This is true, yeah.
This is what happens when you have your siege warfare on sort of like a limited scale rather than across the whole front.
Yeah, so I don't really have anything more coherent to say about this building than other than look at this building. It's pretty cool.
It's a pretty cool building. It's one of his best. It's really good. I mean, if you look at if you want to look at one building that is Frank Furness, it is this. He's working at his best. It's a building that's big, but it's not that big. It's on sort of this 25 foot wide row house lot. He got really good at these banking halls, but also just a building which is has certain confines. It's in a certain way. He did a bunch of these that were good, but this is the best one.
Yeah.
Plus, look at the font on this thing.
Incredible font.
Yeah.
Yeah, the font on. Do you see the font on the building anywhere? Is that shown? Yeah.
No, it was on the last one, but not on this one.
Yeah, not on this one.
It doesn't have any signs at all. You wouldn't fucking know this was a bank, absent the fact that it's got a bunch of money in it.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you look at this and does a cult live here?
Yeah, is this where Doctor Strange lives? You know? Doctor Strange's house has fucking one weird window, and this has existed in the world. It shows you the sort of limited imagination of Marvel.
It's true. Well, we'll get to how the architectural establishment shat all over our friend Frank. That's later, though.
Yeah. The other thing that's important to note is that if Justin becomes mayor of Philadelphia, we're gonna put this building back.
I'm gonna put it back. Yeah.
like they somehow sometimes order developers to do, and they demolish something illegally, where they're like, no, you have to rebuild this brick by brick.
We have to order the National Park Service to do it.
Might work. Give it a shot.
I will say a couple of the slides on this presentation I did steal from the previous historic preservation presentation we did.
I remember this building. I remember saying that it gave me anxiety, and it still does.
Oh, could you imagine? Could you imagine being in 1960 when everything's falling down in the city of Philadelphia, standing under that thing and looking up? It must have been terrifying.
Back to the Hawksmoor thing, give me a 60s Philadelphia adaptation of From Hell. Someone write that. I guess that's kind of Watchmen, but New York, but still.
This is the this is the last bank I want to talk about, but this is the Penn National Bank.
Pointy.
Yeah.
Really pointy. I think we did talk about this in the historic preservation bonus episode.
It's another slide I stole, yeah.
This is the site of where Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence. He did it on the second floor, and so there's this whole kind of beautiful thought, or at least a homage to something of these radiating voussoirs, which are the lines between the arch of the the stone part of the arch, the lines that radiate out of that, those are voussoirs.
Yeah, each individual piece of stone here, that's a voussoir.
Yeah.
Voussier. Vuvuzela.
And so they eventually knocked the building went to rack and ruin. Eventually the government reclaim the site and put back up a perfect copy of the building that used to be, or put up a fake invented copy of the building that they think used to be there, but it's a regular ass row house and now it's like barely open. And it doesn't do anything good. And also, what's their, this fucking asshole.
Yep.
But the building's very good. I would rather have that building there than what's there now. And that's from 1883. So you see that there's not a whole lot of change. There's a little bit, but mostly it's like, hey, we need like a cheaper building. We can't build like the thing that's like 45 feet tall and just made out of granite from all over the country. Like, but during this entire period, this is really where Frank Furness has a very stable, healthy list of clients. The people who he fought in the Civil War with now are all rich instead of soon to be rich.
Yeah.
And he has this very long kind of he has commissions that are both very large and public, and then things that are very much less so. Rows of houses, like apartment buildings. The firm did everything.
The firm was very, very prolific, and we actually don't know how many buildings they built for reasons we'll get to later.
Yeah.
Not all of them are like
Mosby's raiders came in and burned all the documents a second time.
I mean, because there's a lot of buildings that came out of Frank Furness's firms, because it went through a couple names. A lot of them weren't like, with the hand of the master on them. It was just like, well, we got a commission for a building that they want to be kind of normal. We'll just do that. That's fine. We don't care.
I keep trying to bring it into his office, and he keeps shooting at me.
Yeah, the junior architects got good at copying Frank Furness's just enough that it looked like a Frank Furness.
He worked like a sort of a Renaissance painter.
Oh yeah, and
not a Renaissance painter, a Mannerist painter, the kind like Titian or whoever, who's like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that one. It's another fucking like Virgin or whatever. You do it.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to start by painting backgrounds, and then once you do the backgrounds, maybe you can do like the like more complicated backgrounds. And then maybe you can do like parts of the hand that aren't like the complicated part. And these buildings were, I mean, like so there's the reason there's that like kind of influence and the connection that I mentioned at the beginning of of this podcast adventure, where you have this lineage between those architects. They were all training the same way as well. So the practice was, you start with ornament. You have to do all these weird little flowers and stuff like that. So you can actually see like the lilies are the same all the way throughout, kind of thing. In the details. But if you go to the next slide, like to just emphasize that they were the furnace banks were so well known that they were copied. The two smaller images here are copycats next to the larger images, which are originals. The National Bank of Salem, Oregon, by C.S. McNally on the left. And then that's the national
weak shit. That's like, oh fucking, I want to build Hogwarts, as opposed to this one here, which looks like
right. It's the same thing.
Yeah, this is I forget what the name of this one is. What is it?
That's the National Bank of Commerce on the right.
National Bank of Commerce.
This is Kansas City, Missouri.
It looks like a mudslide hitting a minaret, exploding into like a fucking Guitar Hero board. Like,
yeah, no, that's the National Bank of the Republic, Ross. Sorry.
National Bank of the Republic is a clever one, because this tower here, or this turret, or whatever you'd call it, is actually used to disguise the fact that the row steps back about 5 or 6 feet at this location, to make it harmonious with both of the buildings next to it, by creating this incredible cacophony of architectural detail. This is a really good building.
It's the best. Robert Venturi calls it an insane short story of a castle on a city street, and it's just so good.
You got the half arch. You got this almost pointed arch. You got this whatever's going on up here. You know, you got a tower.
Right. You've got like 3 different roofs
here
next to each other.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Sort of like Neuschwanstein, but in a sort of like small bank.
Yeah, we sort of put Neuschwanstein into the trash compactor from Star Wars.
It feels insulting to say it, but so much of this reminds me of the way that AI has of combining details in a way that sort of like almost makes sense, but is profoundly wrong in a sort of greater sense.
Totally.
That's how I feel about these. It's like
the other thing is, I think the building is profoundly correct. You know, ultimately, because it came out of the mind of the master.
Well, you can see all the things where like you can trace vertical or horizontal lines all the way through the facade, but then they're broken up in elevation. It's just there's so much care and thought put into this craziness. And yeah, there's so many different there's so many different architectural elements that are either oversized or undersized on these buildings that they really do have the AI art generation thing where it's like, it looks good enough. Like there's no worry about proportion.
I have a question,
should have had a whole slide about this building, actually.
Oh god, I didn't want to. Didn't we do it on historic preservation? I didn't want to copy it.
Possibly. Was Furness ever like? Did he ever try to explain any of this? I guess that's just quite a hostile way of phrasing it, but like, did anyone ever look at this and go, "Why have you done this?" And did he ever answer them that we know of?
Oh god. I know the answer is like there's a couple times where he gets on the record and he gives a non-answer. He's like he does the thing that Starkitects end up doing, which is like, yeah, this is mostly my own conceptualization. I have a few things that I've remembered from X, Y, or Z, but mostly this is just a complete fabrication based on my genius. It's like very much that kind of answer, I think. Remember, Roz?
I don't think it's so much like that as that he just didn't explain it. He's like, it is what it is.
It was a lot of if you don't like my building, you should very respectfully go to hell, sir.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They bought the building. I built the building for them.
Contractor
side
mindset.
Note, I have a gun, you know?
I have a gun.
Also, I have a gun now.
No more questions.
Some other important, so I threw this slide in there. Roz is right. We should have talked about National Bank of the Republic because it's so very good. But I threw that slide in because Topeka, Kansas City, Missouri, and Salem, Oregon have knockoff Frank Furness buildings. Like the whole design of both of these buildings was just wholesale, just like, yeah, we went to Philadelphia, we saw a good looking building, we said, yeah, that's the one we want.
Wasn't there a whole guy who made a career as a knockoff Frank Furness in like Milwaukee?
Oh, he does that same neo-Grec stuff. I don't want to say that it's a whole career of knockoff furnaces, but what is it? Edwin Townsend Mix? Yeah, really great architect. But these are like literal knockoffs.
Yeah.
You wanted to talk about First Unitarian Church, right, Roz?
I wanted to talk about First Unitarian, but I don't have much to say about it. The main reason I stuck it in here is like, well, this was an option for one of the venues for our live show.
Oh yeah. So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So that's the sanctuary area. You can reserve that space. That's a really great space for live shows and events, and you can also do the basement. I didn't throw a picture of the basement in there.
Yeah, the basement is probably the more appropriate for us.
You really should.
I don't want to be. I don't want to defile the sacred space.
Yeah, sort of being watched over by these big sort of like stained glass windows.
Yeah, while we make
basically
dick jokes.
Secularists.
But
yeah, this is the basement of the First Unitarian Church back in especially back in the mid to late 2000s, 2010s was a very fun punk venue. I think they still have shows there, but it's not as many as they used to have shows every night. And it's a very nice building.
Yeah. This is another one of his commissions he gets, because he is in that Unitarian world, and this is one of the few we've talked about so far that's still around.
Oh God, right?
Yeah, because you've got the
Pafa. That's it.
Yeah, the weird rose window. You got these sort of weird entranceways. It's very heavy set. I've never actually been in the sanctuary. I have been in several back rooms at this though.
If you go back a slide, you can see the sort of like steeple that's in a sort of like weird psycho alpine style.
Yes,
that's a porte cochere. That's just a driveway.
Okay.
It's so good.
This is what Albert Hoffman was like seeing when he like took his bike ride after like first synthesizing LSD.
It's so
you go past a perfectly ordinary Swiss like Catholic church or whatever, and it just looks like this to you.
And like there's like a there's a poetry, right? Like, oh, the biggest roof over the church is the one at the entrance, for the entranceway where you come into the congregation or whatever. That's the place where you're gonna have the biggest welcome and the biggest, pointer. But it's also just fucking it's nuts. It really does look like an acid trip.
I think the big thing here, I think, has unfortunately been demolished, but the rest of the building is still there. And then they got a more conventional addition on the side, which is unfortunate. It does not have the hand of the master.
It looks a bit like is that the whatever the sort of Unitarian equivalent of a rectory is?
Yeah,
vicarage.
I don't think so. I think that's actually a couple meeting spaces are in there.
Okay.
Yeah. What else do we got?
You got railroads.
Oh, we're doing trains now.
That's what you got.
Yeah, we're gonna do the train aspect. So Frank Furness's firm, it's prolific, but it's not really very prolific until he starts getting contracts with the railroads, right? He eventually, at one point or another, became the architect on call for the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Reading Railroad, and the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. But he was most prolific on the Reading. These are two of the most Frank Furness of them.
Yeah, he's what he's done there is he's built them a couple of ski slopes because he's gotten bored with Islam and he's now moved on to sort of a mock Tudor Alpine vibe. I don't know if he like went to like Bavaria or Switzerland in between and just decided, okay, yeah, this is my new thing. But incredible stuff. First of all, they both look designed to like dump huge amounts of snow onto the lines. But second of all, they look incredible.
Yeah, so these are two stations on the Reading Railroad. These are on the what's now the Chestnut Hill West line. East? Is it east? No,
we're gonna get in trouble for this.
No, I'm pretty sure it's hold on. I got Google Maps open.
I'm just looking at this little like turret.
It is Chestnut Hill East. See, the problem with Chestnut Hill East and Chestnut Hill West is that by the compass, Chestnut Hill West and East are due north and south of each other. So, these are on what's now the Chestnut Hill East line. And these are respectively, let me bring up the notes. This is Graver's Lane. You can see it has this incredibly weird tower.
The fucking like battleship deck gun.
Yes. And then this is Mount Airy Station. Both of these from 1882. The idea here being you build the train station, but then above it are the quarters for the station master and his family. Nice and convenient. You get paid, you get a free house as well. So the Reading Railroad at this point, they're building out commuter lines around the Philadelphia area specifically. They're just like, hey, these guys at Furness, Evans and Company seem pretty good. Let's just use them for everything. And it's to the point where they give Frank Furness his own private railroad car to tour all the job sites.
That's a good perk.
That's a really good perk right there. This is what made him enough money that he finally purchased a vacation house in Cape May. Because he had his own house, which was not like something he designed. It was just one he had. Because he was making money. He wasn't making that kind of money, unfortunately.
He was making architect money.
Yeah, architect money. Even then, it
usually
was bad.
means you have to have a wealthy parent.
Yeah. Then at some point, he became staff architect on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. I don't know too much about any of these buildings. In fact, I just found out about this one today. This was the station in Pittsburgh, which may be his most far.
So good.
Yeah, that one's really good. This may be his most far afield building, except maybe one in Maine.
This one on the top right, he appears to have tried to build a pagoda.
Yes.
Right. Oh, the clock is it's an acid trip clock. Yeah, it's like a clock with clock parts added to the clock. It's a steampunk steam clock.
What it does is it represents the B&O's sort of like mandate of heaven. Mm-hmm.
America's first and only railroad. This was the 24th Street station. That's in Philly. It's demolished. It's been replaced by a cube. Yeah, as has been the one in Pittsburgh.
The cube in Philly uses the Star Trek font as their signage.
Yeah, it's a big tall apartment tower that says 2400 on top in the Star Trek font. Yeah.
NCC 2400.
So, and then there's a picture of the interior here. Again, this is from back when he was making bank. He was very successful, but he didn't like have any of these like national ambitions or anything. He's like, yeah, I'll just keep doing buildings in Philly. I'm pretty comfortable here, right? But another one that he built for the B&O is a one that survived somehow, despite the best efforts of CSX. Yeah, it's not in great shape, but this is the Aberdeen, Maryland station from 1885. CSX tried to tear it down in 2003. Didn't happen. I think it's now owned by a historical society, but I do not believe it's in very good shape.
Yeah, because restoring these things is, as we got into in the preservation episode, expensive as fuck.
Yeah. Well, I don't think this would break the bank. Well, it would, depending on who you are. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, for a historical society, I mean, famously rolling in it.
This is true. I don't know. Lots of places, historical societies have restored train stations. I mean, that seems to be like basically what you do. When he gets to the Pennsylvania Railroad, he gets some very big commissions indeed. Although I think to a certain extent, I don't know if his talents work so good on bigger buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gets sort of lost a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, once you're stuck in this sort of format of the large office building, as you see here in Broad Street Station, where you have these uniform floors and so on and so forth, it's kind of like, well, you're just, you do what you can.
You put a bunch of like minarets and stuff on it, but it's up 20 floors,
Yeah, exactly. You don't get a great view of all the details. It's not as bombastic. It's not as in your face. It's way up there. By the time he's working for the Pennsylvania Railroad, this is Broad Street Station here. This is a renovation of the original building. This was done in 1892. It was smaller before Frank Furness got to it. You can see some of the Frank Furness ornamentation here on the train shed. But this is sort of a how you say this? This is probably maybe his biggest building.
It's up there. It gets further alterations by the Wilson brothers too. I think the other one that you have is the arcade building is bigger.
I guess the arcade building may be bigger in terms of floor area. Yeah, but the firm is really churning out buildings to this point. Critical acclaim that he had earlier in his career is almost completely gone now. He's mostly like working just because, okay, you're in Philadelphia, you hire Furness, Evans and Company, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just what you do.
First of all, you owe him a bunch of favors. Second of all, he's established. Third of all, he will shoot you.
He will shoot you, yes.
Yeah, but it is very much, it's like, I think one of the big challenges with a building like this is there's no single grand entrance or single area of focus, right? It has to have all these different interpenetrations. There's no...
Right, it's sort of an office building first and, a train station second in a way, at least in how the architecture is done. So, this one is okay, not great. Again, he had problems with the big buildings. Then you have down here in a corner, you have the arcade building, right, which was named so because it was built over a sidewalk almost entirely. Like, this is a very thin building, and there are additional buildings behind it. This was more offices for the Pennsylvania Railroad that weren't in Broad Street Station.
I will say, I think the one good big Frank Furness building is the West End Title and Trust Company. I don't think it made it or the West End Trust Company. I don't think it made it in this presentation though. You can look it up afterwards.
I don't think it did. No.
I think we can possibly have Dev at it at this point.
Thanks, Devin.
Big spinning sort of like thing. Thank you, Devin. Hi, Devin.
Yeah. But we're sort of we're in our late Frank Furness era. One fun thing is this. So this building is, again, like everything else, demolished. But one of the sculptures from the interior, a bas relief, survives. It's called The Spirit of Transportation. It's by a man named Carl Bitter. It's now in 30th Street Station, which is the new big train station in Philadelphia. But another one I found out when I was researching this is right here. You can't see much of it, is because it's very low resolution. Is a bas relief entitled "Elements of Fire and Water Tamed and Harnessed in Service to Man."
Fuck, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's so good.
By the same artist. So that's really cool. That one does not survive, unfortunately.
Ah, damn.
Yeah. And this had, I believe, the largest train shed ever constructed. I'm not sure. Yeah. Exchange Place may have been bigger. I don't know. But I think this is the biggest one. That burned down. And they replaced it with normal sheds.
What happens when you don't have your elements of fire and water properly tamed and harnessed,
I was about to say, yeah.
Hubris.
Man's hubris.
And then, so this is the one where we put it in 30 seconds before recording, but this is actually Frank's house.
This is his house.
This is on Locust Street, I believe.
Yes.
At 7th. We're going to talk a little bit about the houses and the people of Philadelphia who he built houses for probably right now. But that room in the back is Frank Furness's personal man cave.
Yes,
his gamer den.
He had a gamer den. Yeah, he had a man cave. He had a. It's called it. It was his smoking room.
Right, that's what he called it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He built himself a sort of a log cabin sort of situation here.
Yeah, and he made his own furniture, like that shitty table.
Yes. So
it's fuck you, it works for me. There's sort of like a lot of overlap here with Ted Kaczynski, I would say.
Well, it's said to be inspired from his many trips to the Rocky Mountains, but also his time in the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to feel like I'm back in the barracks.
Right. Again, PTSD never hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no like cushions here. All the furniture is bear pelts. I don't know if you see that.
Yeah.
like there's no cushions. It's just like folding chairs with furs on them.
Please tell me he lived to see Teddy Roosevelt become president.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I think he did.
He's 11, yeah.
Right. Vindication,
Which actually
designed the interior of his parents' house.
Yeah, now you're getting ahead of us.
Nah, yeah, all right.
No, that's fine.
When you get down to it, all of the psychology going on here, it's all bear pelts. You know, it's bear pelts all the way down.
Bear pelts. There's some what is it, a wampum belt?
Yeah.
There's some
like
just
stuff about war,
in general.
You know, of such things as American masculinity built.
Seriously.
I was about to say, it used to be cooler. Now it's like all gamer lights, you know. I think this is the Victorian. This is the Victorian version of gamer lights.
Oh God.
The average gamer now barely has one bear pelt.
Not a single one.
We were also going to share anecdotes that we had forgotten to mention earlier in the episode, Roz. I think the main one that I'm thinking about is Furness was known to tell people that he would really love if he could get all of his clients together, round them all up at the Academy of Music, just so he could tell them all to go to hell. Just the greatest thing imaginable, especially if you have if shout out to anybody who's ever worked with clients.
He was also friends with Walt Whitman, I want to say. We got a whole through line of American literature here.
Makes sense. Another sort of bear pelts guy, you know.
This is true, yeah.
What do you think they talked about? Because Frank Furness didn't read books.
Being gay.
Yeah, I think they probably just talked about being gay and shooting bears.
Being gay and shooting bears. Well, it wasn't. He was friends with him through his brother Horace, though. So, you know, maybe they were gay and Frank was just there.
He's just along for the ride. Yeah. It is legal for straight men to be like friends with gay dudes, I hear. So maybe
I don't believe you.
The thing that I keep finding is I keep looking at the Gamer Den and I keep finding new things, but the thing that I focus on a lot is we made fun of the table. Note also its companion piece chair right at the foot of the table. It's like it's like cut off quite badly. You can see the seat of the stool and like fucking it's 2.5 wooden supports, and it looks like it's made out of like one piece of indifferently chipped off slate or something.
It just looks like it's made by a child and about to fall over.
I just like the bare ass lamp hanging from the ceiling, you know.
Right.
I had to go
it definitely gives
into
the joist. It really looks like a derelict space.
Yeah, I know. He had to work for this level of dereliction. I have a copy of this photo, but it's in book form. That's higher resolution, and there is a lot you're not seeing here.
It's just like a bunch of empty cans of Red Bull.
Oh my god! Yeah, bunch of cigar ends. You know.
What do you mean you don't love nasty, dirty, disgusting, fucking filthy girls? Just
giant cigars. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh god.
Yeah.
What crazy in there?
Once every couple. Once every like 6 or 7 months, I smoke a cigar recreationally, and I forget how bad it makes me feel the next day.
Yeah, cigar smoking. I mean, listen, I think I've been clear that the federal government needs to invent cigarettes that are good for you. They need to invent cigars that are good for you in a hurry, because like unless you really like give yourself over to smoking cigars and you become the kind of person who just like smokes a cigar constantly, you smoke one cigar, you feel like you're gonna die.
You feel awful,
while.
Yeah.
I don't know why it became a thing to like celebrate something good happening with a cigar, because if you just do like a cigar in isolation, you're not going to celebrate the thing. You might throw up right after, and then for the next like day and a half, you're just going to be lying on a couch.
You just like your breath smells horrible even to you.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I don't throw up or anything, but also I'm going to use the restroom. I'll be right back.
It's fine. I can keep looking at this guy's Gamer Den for a while.
Yeah.
What all does he have hanging up here? Like, old shirts more? Is that like a small, like a raccoon pelt or something?
I assume that they're like things that he killed in Fairmount Park in Philadelphia. Like that's the vibe of like a fox pelt. What looks like
Yeah.
that looks like a raccoon.
He really wanted all of the like wilderness outfits in Red Dead Redemption 2. And I respect that because that's the first thing I do is I get bored with the plot and I fuck off and I just go and like hunt animals and bring them to the weird Canadian guy. So
The vibe I got from learning about him doing the Civil War was definitely that he went full cowboy and just embraced that.
uh-huh. I sometimes you have to, you know. But
Rise to the occasion.
incredible. Yeah, yeah. I think that bear pelt covering the sort of chair on the left there still has the ears on it.
I really wouldn't be surprised.
No, no. So like hunted, badly taxidermied, and now sort of soaking up cigar smoke for the rest of this guy's life.
Yeah, I love that the whole thing is like burned. Like there's so much black soot around the fireplace. Like it's
Uh-huh.
never been cleaned once.
Ah. I mean, look at the roof timbers. Like above the fireplace, there's just like some of those have charred. I swear. This is sort of like developing an immune system where it's like if any germs get into Frank Furness's body, he like all of his like blood cells combine to beat them to death instantly.
Yeah, it's described as he built this himself in the back of his house, and
In a
I think
bad mood, seemingly.
I don't think he had very many good moods. It's also my understanding
because of the PTSD, probably. Yeah.
The subheader for the biography is called "Architecture and the Violent Mind." Like,
I get the feeling of Mr. Furness is that he was kind but not nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're done with the man cave. Yeah. We're done with the gamer den. What else we got in the docket?
Now,
you could have this. Yeah, have this guy design your house.
Yeah, yes. House or social club for rich people.
He was very good at houses.
Yeah.
By the way, I would like to point out this is a freakishly wide door.
Fuck, it is.
It's an extremely wide door.
All the proportions of that
very
door.
Obese man to enter the house.
Yeah,
I go by this door frequently
on his freakishly heavy bicycle. This is a podcast that has sort of the occasional recurring character, and the extremely fat man on the freakishly heavy bicycle is one that just comes back to me every so often.
How does he get it up the step, though?
I do a little exactly sort of like BMX style, like ollie, you know?
Oh, God. If he could do that, I don't think he'd be freakishly fat.
It's like very, very developed thighs, you know?
Yeah, it's hard to actually express how big those top two houses are, because they're basically the sizes of like small hotels or apartment buildings. Yeah, the building next door to it.
I love wide door, very narrow alley too.
Wide door, narrow alley. It's like a 20-story building next to it that is on the same footprint of like building lot
with a wide door and a narrow alley.
Yeah, that whole building.
Inspecting the side of this building is great. I've done this with two buildings that were like 20 stories high that had this exact level of separation. It was like, if there's a problem there, we're not going to catch it.
Yeah, the ones that give me nightmares is there was a guy in New York who like fell into one of these between two buildings that like didn't have like an exit. He just died in there. Like that gives me nightmares. That's the worst thing that architecture can do to you, maybe, I think.
Sometimes they get really small, then you can't get out.
Yeah, I think
we talked about the caves. Don't go into buildings either, folks.
No. When buildings when buildings sort of produce caves, don't go into those either.
Yeah.
Live an untroubled wild life. Live on bear pelts.
Yes.
You know, only live in tents. You know.
I don't know if I have anything super coherent to say on this other than these houses are fucking huge. The one in the lower right is it's the Marion Cricket Club. They're all just giant buildings, and when this is kind of what Roz was talking about earlier. Like he does much better work on smaller commissions, even if they're like this big. But you can tell that like there's not a lot inventing going on. There's a lot of like applying previously used lessons to kind of make these interesting buildings.
Here's what I think is the best house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can't build like a better house.
Definitely weird and furnessy though.
Well, that's because he built it for his sister and her husband. You know, he got that he got that kid
as a punishment.
No, Alice, it's such a cool house. No, it was for a patent medicine guy, Dr. Horace Jane, who married Frank Furness's sister, and he did a bunch of the Dr. Jane's like cure all medicine cures kind of patent medicine. If you're feeling sick, you take some eel juice. Try that, maybe you'll feel better.
House that eel juice built.
Here's an example of one of these things in architecture. This is the Thomas Alexander Scott residence. Thomas Alexander Scott, of course, president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, and famously did a corrupt bargain that led to the election of Rutherford Hayes and the end of Reconstruction.
Oops.
So, again, this is the problem with architecture is your clients fucking suck.
Yeah.
58 rooms in that house.
Oh my god.
The bottom of everything is the Pennsylvania Railroads.
He also did Alexander Cassett's townhouse that was on Rittenhouse Square.
Yeah. So is that one. The Scott residence.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'd like my house in the shape of a large cube, please. With a smaller cube attached to it.
And then just the last one's Dahlebran on the right. That's on the main line. That's an example. Like the two lower ones are out on the main line where the Pennsylvania Railroad executives had their summertime houses and clubs and those sorts of things. So he was totally established. He was the guy who they went to when they needed a new clubhouse for the club. But that doesn't necessarily, there's interesting things about it, but I personally think you take a look at the Frank Furness's house versus versus his smoking room. The interiors of these houses are what's really interesting. If you go to the next slide,
pelts.
Yeah, pelts. And these are the ones where it's like, oh, this is the pelt that I'm putting on the rug for somebody else instead of just myself.
Lots of carved dark woods as well.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So the one on the left is the Rudolph Ellis house. The two on the right are the Bloomfield Moore house. Roz, do you want to read that little thing in the notes? Basically,
hold on. It says
I can read this for you. Depend whoever you want.
HTTPS :
Thank you so much.
So this is a tweet from someone called June. Winter's Greetings.
It's a piece of a book. All right. Actually, Roz, you have the actual book. I just don't have it.
What page is it on the book?
I'll read you the quote. Right.
So should I set it up?
What you've said here is, don't ever tell Frank Furness that you went to college.
Right.
And so we quote as follows. So next day, he presented himself to Frank Furness and informed him he had come to enter his employ. Frank Furness was a curious character. He affected the English in fashion. He wore loud plaids and a scowl, and from his face depended fan-like a marvelous red beard, beautiful in tone, with each separate hair delicately crinkled from beginning to end. Moreover, His face was snarled and homely as an English bulldog's. Lewis's eyes were riveted in infatuation to this beard as he listened to a string of oaths yards long. For it seems after he had delivered his initial fiat, Furness looked at him half blankly, half enraged, as at another kind of dog that had slipped in through the door. His first question had been as to Lewis's experience, to which Lewis replied modestly enough that he had just come from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. This answer was the detonator that set off the mine, which blew up in fragments all the schools in the land and scattered the professor's headless and limbless quarters of earth and hell. Lewis, he said, was a fool. He said Lewis was an idiot to have wasted his time in a place where one was filled with sawdust like a doll and became a prig, a snob, and an ass. As the smoke blew away, he said, of course, you don't know anything and are full of damnable conceit.
Right. So
fucking go off, Frank.
Yeah, so well, guess who got that job? Lewis Sullivan.
Yeah. So Lewis and that young man.
Fuck you, you're fired. I mean, okay, fine, you're hired, whatever.
You're hired, yeah.
And that young man was Lewis Sullivan. Right. So the house on the right, the Bloomfield Moore house, Lewis Sullivan, who's the architect who kind of figures out in a coherent way what a skyscraper should theoretically look like.
Yeah, because he went to college and learned how to read.
No. It's not because he went to college. It's because he hung out with Frank Furness.
Yeah, Frank Furness knocked all the sawdust out of him.
I want to see a buddy cop movie about these two, quite badly.
So Lewis Sullivan is walking around Philadelphia, sees this Bloomfield Moore house.
Frank Furness is doing fucking training day shit to him, trying to get him to smoke crack.
Just imagine the hazing ritual at Furness, Evans and Company.
Which probably involves the shotgun.
Definitely. You definitely have to do a sharpshoot contest. Like, no question about it.
I believe there's also an anecdote. He said the interns have to keep the drinks cold.
Probably. Right. So Lewis Sullivan is actually one of the few references to Frank Furness that we have, like the man, the myth, the legend. And it's all shit like that. Where he sees this one house, the two pictures on the right, and he's like, who designed this? I need to go talk to that guy. Goes to Frank Furness's office, and then after saying that he went to college and then says, I'm sorry for going to college, Frank Furness hires him as a draftsman. He works there for about a year total. It may be even a little bit less time than that, but you can see the there's just so much stylistic resemblance, as we'll show off later in the slides, I think. But Lewis Sullivan's attention to detail, all these spiky flowers, all these very fine tendrily things. Those are all based on stuff that he learned from Frank Furness. And yeah, it's these crazy interiors that just go on and on and on and on and on and have more and more and more and more and more stuff, and then you put your stuff on top.
Yes, less is a bore.
Exactly.
This is the house for a type of guy who, like, I'm loath to keep referencing Boardwalk Empire just because it's the last show that I watched cover to cover. But this is the type of house that you live in if you call yourself something like the Commodore.
Yeah,
no,
pretty
that's
much.
New York Central. This is for Pennsylvania Railroad guys.
Right.
The president, fine.
Yes.
It's their version of that.
You're the president to the point where people are confused if you're talking about the real president or the president of the railroad.
People are confused as to whether you're talking about the real president or the president of the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you think about like all these photos, right? These are all taken at like the end of the 19th century, like the 1890s, early 1900s. They're so dark. They're like, the rooms are scary. And then you can imagine what happens when somebody doesn't take care of them for 10 years or 15 years or 25 years. The house just is falling apart. And that's what Scooby-Doo is based on.
Yes.
Next slide has.
Unfortunately, there was the mystery machine had not been invented yet, so the spooky ghost did manage to get most of these buildings demolished.
Exactly. It all comes back to real estate and land grabs with that show.
Yeah.
Which in its way, you know, is radicalizing kids against capitalism and property developers. So, you know what?
It's true.
Fair enough.
These are all pieces from Theodore Roosevelt Sr.'s house in New York City, where young Theodore Roosevelt, who went on to be president, grew up.
And was like, man, if I just run hard enough that I don't have asthma anymore, I too could like fill my house with pelts.
Yes.
Pretty much. And so
I could go full cowboy mode and I could become chief of the NYPD. I could do just a bunch of weird shit that would turn me into sort of like an epic meme guy in 100 years.
But back when he was still just a sickly child, young Teddy Roosevelt ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner around that table there.
We're all of us on our sort of different points on the trajectory from sickly child to epic meme guy. You know,
yes.
I mean, whomst among us.
Yeah.
But those are herons who have frogs in their beaks on the table legs.
Cool.
The bed,
I like some
just
violence around the dinner or around the breakfast table.
Well, they're eating, aren't you?
Nature is red in tooth and claw.
This is true.
So should you be as you descend upon your eggs.
So very fitting for the dining room, right? And then I think there's owls are on the bed. But it's all these little references
to nature. Because the owl is the horniest bird.
Sleepiest bird.
I prefer my interpretation.
No, I prefer your interpretation too. And that's the library.
Although curiously, no owls in the library, despite owls, you know, having a fucking like book thing since fucking Athena. You know,
aren't owls actually very stupid?
Yes, but you know they've got good branding.
Okay, you know that's how. I mean that's how we are too. I mean,
yeah, good PR gets you everywhere. You know.
So basically, in summary, closing out this chapter, a bunch of rich people houses that we don't have anymore all got built and then were mostly demolished.
Frank Furness's greatest design, the interior of Theodore Roosevelt Jr.'s mind.
Yes.
straight line from him to the Perdicaris affair, you know?
Yep. Anything else? Or I think we only got a couple.
We got to move on to the
slides left.
Maybe the magnum.
I like
opus.
this one.
Yeah,
looking very German to me. This one looks like the Rortus like Rathaus.
So this is 1890. By then, Frank Furness's sphere of influence had extended to all of the people who were the trustees of the University of Pennsylvania, as well as all of the other railroad executives and other wealthy magnates, right?
Again, no one outside of Philadelphia, though. This man has never interacted with anyone from outside of Philadelphia. The city limits are where the influence ends, with some very small exemptions.
So when Penn moved out to West Philadelphia, they needed to construct a new library. The emphasis on this whole project was to have something that the students could utilize, but also that it could be added onto in the future. This is like it's again one of these like bizarrely technological buildings when it comes down to it.
I mean, meanwhile, Pittsburgh is like building their fucking like nerd cathedral at this point, so may not be the case. But I think the timing works out on that one.
That sounds about right to me. Yeah, 1890. Yeah, that's probably about right.
Yeah. They weren't how. Um, this building's cool too, though. You should look at this one instead of that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a
So
better building.
by this time period, Furness is working almost entirely on these monochromatic compositions, right? So rather than all of the crazy colors used in the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, this building's all red. It's all terracotta and brick and stone that's also in the terracotta brick color scheme. If you go to the next slide, you kind of get a sense for there's like a very clever the plan is executed very cleverly and basically just copies a cathedral to make it work, right? So you have these two separate areas. You have what would be the oh god, what is it? It's been so fucking long. Where the
apse?
With the apse where the priest
Yeah.
lectures, right?
Yeah.
The priest delivers a sermon. You do
left
this one,
all
Ross.
these giant steel beams exposed. Again, very very modernist, very forward thinking here. Not something anyone would do for a while after.
And that's the reading room, right? So it's this huge vaulted space that in a plan looks like a Christian church or but in execution really has like this whole different look to it. There's those little
I would
alcoves.
say spiritually this is a basilica, like a Roman basilica, because there's no transept.
It's been
they've put in a very sort of like college TM sort of encomium to like language in the abstract here over this transom here. Oh, blessed letters that combine in one, all ages past and make one. Live with all, by you we do confer, with those who are gone and the dead living unto council call. Which, one of those sentences that you know that the person who composed it has, like, read too much Latin.
Yes.
And that man was William Henry Furness. Or Horace Howard Furness, the Shakespeare scholar. He gave his brother all the quotes.
Damn. The Nepo baby.
Yeah.
True classic. You call your brother who's the Shakespeare scholar. They don't even have phones back then.
No, it's 1890. They do. They're just not very good.
Yeah, but you get your brother to like gussy up your stuff by like putting some fucking bard on it.
Yeah. You still got the
quote from anywhere.
He's still doing the Islamic arches. He's still doing this interesting contrast with materials. He's just, got the voussoirs going that are contrasting with the brick. This is all interior. This is all, of course, still there. They tried to tear it down. They didn't manage it.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting
quote.
One of the most interesting parts of this building, though, is if we go back a slide. Well, if you pay attention to this area here, which is the stacks, you can see these two things protruding here. Those are rails that were built into the building. Mm-hmm. The idea being that if you needed more room for books, you could slide the exterior wall out and insert a new section.
Mm-hmm. Fuck, that's cool.
Yeah, and oh god, we don't have a picture of it, but if you look on that side of it, it looks like an Italian basilica.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's another reference to like churching, and that's all of this. So the stacks, which are only it was designed as an employees only area. All of the floors have frosted glass on them, so that light would go all the way through the building.
It's a cool building, which I've somehow still never been inside.
Yeah, if you're a Penn student and can take Justin to the Fisher Fine Arts Library,
I would like to go to the Fisher Fine Arts Library.
Universities, maybe your universities are different, but like, do they check who goes in them? Like,
you need a student ID to get in this building.
Because it's a library, of course.
It's a library,
okay.
and it's in an urban area, and they don't want a criminal or a homeless person to get in there. I'm gonna walk out with all the books because I can't get. I don't know. I used to be able to get in when I had a Drexel ID, but I can't anymore because I don't know where that is.
Yeah.
I spent all that time.
Hogwarts.
I spent all that time at Drexel University. Like, maybe I should probably go into this library once just to see what it's like. Didn't do it.
I went into all the like Hogwarts bits of Glasgow, and they don't check. The library is the brutalist bit, so you got to have ID to get into that because they don't want you stealing the books. But like, they don't care if you go in the Hogwarts bit. That's fine. No one's gonna notice.
Yeah. I don't know. University of Pennsylvania students, let me in your library. Also, your school sucks.
Yeah.
This is sort of the magnum opus of Frank Furness's career. It's one of the best buildings in the world. But there's this issue where tastes are sort of changing rapidly nationally, which is where we have to get to sort of the Gerard Bank situation.
Yeah. I think we'll cover this one pretty quickly, but I think this is really
No, I think this is a funny story. We should dwell on it.
All right, we're gonna spend a lot of time on this one. Everybody buckle in.
Next hour of this.
Yeah.
All right. So the Gerard Trust Company, right, is the successor to what was Stephen Gerard's bank, and Stephen Gerard's bank goes all the way back to the founding of America, when he loaned America all the money to get America going. So they need a new location.
He wound up buying the first bank of the United States.
Yeah, Stephen Gerard bought out the first bank of the United States. Is that what it is? Yeah. And so the Gerard Trust Company has this parcel at Broad and Chestnut Street, right next to City Hall, right next to another Frank Furness building. And of course, the trustees of Gerard Bank go, well, who are we going to hire for this building? And they all look around the room and they're like, well, oh shit, we have to hire Frank Furness, or at least the Furness firm.
Yes.
So they write Furness, Evans and Company a letter saying that they'd like a building, but they would like it specifically not in the Frank Furness style.
Cut that Frank Furness shit out.
And they go cut that shit out. Nobody wants to see that.
This is I think the angriest a human being maybe has ever been.
Right.
Oh yeah. It goes the way you think.
Okay. Based on what I've learned about the character of Frank Furness and his personality, that letter landing in his in tray.
You want a classical building? I'll give you a fucking classical building.
Right. So it's the early 1900s at this point. Frank Furness is old. That doesn't mean that he's not angry and ornery, etc. But he's old. He knows when to fight a battle and when not to fight a battle. So all that happens is through Alan Evans, his business partner, he sends watercolor sketches back to the representatives. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yes, I believe he has Evans sign them, even though he's doing them.
Right. So he just wants. Right. So here I have the quote here. A letter sent privately to Evans on June 16th, so not to the Furness firm, just to Evans, made the formal offer. My interest is in you and not your firm. For while I have the highest respect and esteem for Mr. Furness, we do not wish a building designed upon his well-known lines. I say this without the slightest...
that weird shit.
Yeah, we don't want that weird shit. I say this without the slightest reference to Mr. Furness's great ability and skill as a designer. And then...
There's also an extent to here where the architectural press based in New York had started really shitting on Frank Furness and some of his imitators. The guys who founded like Architectural Digest were like putting out a column quarterly, which was like architectural atrocities or something like that. and they were like, look at all this crazy fucking shit in Philadelphia. Can you believe this?
Right. So instead of Frank Furness doing the thing that he might have said back in the day, which was like, all you fuckers can go to hell, never contact my office again, Evans tells him about it. And then Frank Furness goes to the Girard Trust Company and says, like, hey, I'm really sorry. I'll do whatever anybody asks me. I just do whatever I want. I just do whatever my clients ask me to do. So if you don't want a furnace building, we'll make something really nice. God.
That's sad.
Yeah, I mean, the firm's business had unfortunately been kind of drying up at this point.
Yeah. So he called himself a variety artist, which is like really a bummer. And so, like, okay, what happens next? Right. So even though they're like, no, we're not interested, we're good. We just want Alan Evans on the project. They basically just do it anyway, like a normal building, and they go off of one of those watercolor sketches that Frank Furness had originally made. And then Furness refined the design. Then
wait, so he just like does it and like just pretends not to.
Yeah, so he designs the building.
What happens? Yeah, he designs the building and pretends not to.
And so then I guess they're still in like a collaborative process with the board, with Evans kind of serving as the go-between. They must realize that something's up, and they're like, we're going to hand this over to McKim, Mead, and White.
Yeah. They gave it over to the pedophiles.
Yeah.
Or the one pedophile and the two others that had other hangups.
So Evans is the actual go-between to hand off the files, and then that's basically quote unquote it. So if you look now, a lot of times the building is described as a McKim, Mead, and White building, but this is 100% a Frank Furness design that very creatively mixes all of these disparate elements, layers a classical revival skin over a typical Frank Furness thing, and really makes this design work. This building's there today. It's got only a couple alterations. It's a really impressive space.
You can also see where McKim, Mead, and White took over the building, because on one of the sides of the building, it's very subtle, but there is a point where there is additional ornamentation in the entablature, which abruptly stops.
Yeah, highly recommend if you go on Google Street View and see where this building on Chestnut Street meets with the building next to it. You'll see just a little bit of extra ornament.
Just a little bit of extra ornament. And McKim, Mead, and White took over and like, I've cut that out. They get the spray bottle out, Yeah,
no more weird shit.
No more weird shit. No, not on our watch. This is also like part of where, the tastes were changing, I think, for the worse. And this is why a lot of
we're embracing modernism and we're embracing modernity and rejecting tradition.
We're embracing the City Beautiful movement, really. I think at this point, you're talking about, well, we're going to do straight up classicism again. We're gonna do all this sort of boring temple bullshit.
Right. We're done with anything that gets really scary looking. It's only going to be classical temples from here out.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
And this is sort of, where I guess we're skipping ahead a bit with the next slide, but this is how a lot of Frank Furness's stuff gets demolished, because it was neglected for a while. And then this wonderful thing called the National Park Service decides to make
these guys.
They decide to make Philadelphia more historic than it was.
By removing some history from it, sort of like a dentist pulling teeth.
Yeah, removing quite a lot of the history, in fact. So here's Independence Hall, which is in Center City, Philadelphia. And you can see up here a picture, which I stole from, again, our historic preservation episode. And you can see that where there's this big, nice, grassy mall that no one uses, especially people who live here, there used to be buildings with like stuff in them, right? Among them were several Frank Furness buildings and also countless other nice, architectural gems, right? Which were, unceremoniously demolished because we need to glamorize where did they sign the Constitution in there? I think or did they just sign the Declaration of Independence?
They did some like Whig bullshit.
They did some Whig bullshit in there, and then it's like we got to demolish all these buildings for it. It's crap. It's stupid. It's a bad idea. They shouldn't have done it.
Yeah, it really is the worst thing ever. It really frustrates me to think about what could have been there.
Among this is, not just in front of Independence Hall, but down Chestnut Street this way, where there's fewer pictures I could put up here. Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of these like small bank buildings we talked about were, and other Frank Furness, buildings. Just because, again, they were so out of fashion because those New Yorkers didn't like them. They were just neglected for a long time.
Well, there's
the
a couple
intellectual colonization of Philadelphia by the cowards in New York City.
Yes.
And there's a couple other things that happened right around this time, like, in the preceding, maybe let's say, 30 years, right in between the 30s and the 50s, the central business district really shifted, so that what used to be this kind of healthy and thriving, quote unquote, bankers row type of thing then suddenly disappears, and all of the banking is on the 1200 block of Chestnut Street now, or something like that. Like,
all the banks consolidated. You didn't have a merchant's bank and a farmer's bank and a corn products bank, and then like a chemical bank. A chemical bank stayed around longer than the rest of them.
And corn.
Well, because we kept using all the chemicals.
Yeah,
this is true. You use corn to make chemicals.
It's true.
Yeah.
You exchange corn.
Then you use the chemicals to make the corn. So it's a good relationship.
Symbiotic relationship there. It's all been folded into PNC or something by now, I'm sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is that the history that got remembered here is Independence Mall, and the kind of very brief moment where America was fighting for the revolution, and we lost this entire body of history about Philadelphia's manufacturing past. All of these incredible buildings that once were there just disappeared overnight.
Curiously, we lost a lot of abolitionist history as well.
Interesting.
Right, weird how that happens.
Yeah, I know, because I believe if you look at
which side won the Civil War again in the long run.
So, in the short term, the Union. In the long term, ugh.
It gets messy, doesn't it?
I want to say that like Pennsylvania Hall was like right here. Don't quote me on that. And maybe it's somewhere in that vicinity. But yeah, that's part of, I want to say, the Federal Reserve building now. It's one of those buildings they decided not to reconstruct for some reason. I don't know why, because they reconstructed a lot of like colonial era buildings, just as part of this project. But apparently Pennsylvania Hall wasn't going to be one of
them. More destruction porn on the next page. That's about it.
Yeah.
This was
how they massacred my boy.
There really isn't anything to. I mean, you can talk about the devastation of this area, and like a lot of this founded the national preservation movement in a lot of ways, or at least helped to kickstart it. But
I don't understand, June. This is historic preservation. So we can see our
all those cars being preserved in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Well, and then right. We did it. We fixed the problem, everyone.
We saved the city.
Yeah, this kind of smart, walkable, mixed-use density should be illegal to build in many cities in the United States. And the government said that full-throatedly, and now here we are.
But it's fine because it was like slum clearance, you know.
Yeah. I don't think it was even that slummy. I'm going to be honest. I'm pretty sure back then this was like a neighborhood that was fine, except that
it got significantly worse.
We had to do some kind of like national project to honor our history by destroying all these buildings.
So I remember some of this was like bicentennial, wasn't it? Like 70s even.
I think it was extended in the 70s, but the mall was started in like the 50s, I think.
Yeah.
Fucking Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Yeah, Independence Mall was it was an earlier God, what was it? Yeah, it was a separate project before it got really folded in.
Yeah, so anyway, Independence Mall is a revanchist bullshit which destroyed our boy, Frank Furness.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that was several other
destroyed
factors.
Frank Furness was death. Yeah, he experienced that, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah, so we gotta, I guess, talk about the end of Frank Furness, right? So the firm didn't get as much work in his later years. I believe he wound up having to sell his house in Media, Pennsylvania, move back in to Center City. I think he was supported by family for a while. And he eventually, I believe he died in 1912. He was not penniless or like destitute like Louis Sullivan would be, but not as wealthy as he once was, and he was very much in obscurity. The architectural press didn't really talk about him, but his firm outlasted him. That folded in the 1930s. All its archives are just thrown into a dumpster, which is why we're still finding new buildings built by Furness, Evans and Company.
So it was right. Mosby's Raiders Revenge, you know?
Yeah. Mosby's Raiders came back in the form of a dumpster. One of the things,
I think it's a fair comparison between a dumpster and Confederate cavalry. But
that's a good point. Yeah. One of the things is, especially later in his life, he had a lot of bad mouthing by the architectural press, as I've mentioned. The Furness never seemed to really care about the architectural press, though, because as long as the firm was making money, he was fine keeping this operation very parochial. As I said, they didn't really operate outside the immediate Philadelphia area.
You have some like work on the table. You've got a glass of whiskey that's cold. You have a revolver that's loaded. What more do you want?
Exactly. That's an ideal way to go through life. You have a smoking room, it seems like a great place to be.
Drunk, armed, working. That's not bad. You can do a lot
making
worse
money. Yeah.
Yeah.
So according to, but there were some like contemporary like assessments of his work, which I think led to some of the aspects where all this stuff got demolished earlier than it should have been. For instance, the Architectural Record, Volume 1, Issue 3, mentioned they really tried hard to avoid mentioning Frank Furness's name. They talked about the architecture of Chestnut Street.
Yeah.
Which was a pathological collection, an assortment of anomalies. These are pretentious edifices which would be revolting to the inhabitants of Omaha, and that their authors would be ashamed to erect in Kansas City.
Oh, fuck you. This flyover state bullshit.
Yeah, literally, that one knockoff building was from 1890. This is 2 years later.
Yeah. This was in March 1892. This is from The Complete Works of Frank Furness. That's page 134. There's this mood that like, okay, this Frank Furness era, this is an ugly past that needs to be forgotten. We need to move forward into doing neoclassicism from the late 1790s, which is the City Beautiful movement. These are blights. These are ugly, tasteless old buildings. There's sort of efforts to erase him from, the architectural record as anyone with any influence or any kind of like clout. Even when Louis Sullivan himself said Frank Furness was a major inspiration for his work, Louis Sullivan's All right, this is a complex one. There was a contemporary book about H. Richardson where Louis Sullivan was a source, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Frank Furness was a big influence on myself, and is a big influence on these other things." Try to completely expunge him from the record, right?
He taught me to be ashamed of going to college.
Yes. The other thing is like imitation, the sincerest form of flattery. There's architects around the region contemporarily that unknowingly or knowingly copied his designs. Willis G. Hale is one. He was a little off.
One thing I will say, it seems like a hard style of architecture to copy.
Yes.
Like, it's so itself that, like, you got to work hard to try and render it, I feel like.
You have to be traumatized in a way that only the Civil War could do to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm amazed that, like, the First World War didn't have more of an aftermath of that. The US should have joined it earlier. It could have had more of a sort of a furnesque,
I was about to say, we have more interesting architecture. I suppose this is validating the theory that the First World War caused modernism. If we say that the Civil War caused furnessism.
He was like a modernist before his time, right? Like,
yes,
you put him in a different time in a different place, but like as traumatized. You put him in like a sort of 1920s Europe. He would have done very well for himself,
Yeah,
I also like to think he would have been a communist and agreed with me about all the specific ways in which communism should work.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
Obviously, no question. Whatever identity you want to assign on Frank Furness, I think, is totally applicable.
He's long dead, and so are most of his relatives. So we can assign anything we want to.
Yeah, and if the relatives say otherwise, we'll just say that they're lying.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not like rediscovered.
They actually threw all of his old blog posts about what kind of Marxist-Leninist he was in the dumpster.
Thank God Mosby got there. Otherwise, we'd have to think about this.
When did Mosby die is my question. Well, entirely possible. John Singleton Mosley died in 1916. So you know what? He outlived him by 4 years.
God.
Entirely plausible.
Yeah, that seems about right. Yeah, we still have Mosby's memoirs. We don't have Frank Furness's documents.
What does that say? Interesting.
I know, right? So he's not really rehabilitated until the 1970s, which is well after most of his best buildings are demolished. I believe it's this is sort of like a postmodernist movement where they look back and like, who the fuck is this guy? Why did we get rid of his buildings?
Well, and like, I don't know. I think there's like some of Lutyens' buildings in the UK like really come similar to the weight and the kind of like weird historical details that Furness used. And yeah, it's like if you took every Lutyens building and you kicked it out of the canon, like that's what we did with Frank Furness. That's not helpful for anybody.
It's completely like ignored for like 60 years, and only just getting back into like the architectural canon. I mean, if you live here in Philadelphia and you have any kind of architectural education, you're going to learn about Frank Furness. I do not believe that's the case for the rest of the country, even though this is a brilliant mind whom we can only aspire to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Papa
assisted by
ends
gun.
Up being in textbooks, but yeah,
yeah, we can only aspire to be as cantankerous, as drunk, as armed, or as brilliant.
Well, this is the thing, right? I think a thing about architecture is to create great architecture. You have to deal with clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dealing with clients is like the biggest part of the problem. And if you want your architectural vision to go forward, you have to convince the client that your idea is right. And what you do now is you have to be good at manipulation. You have to be
wear
like
a little turtleneck, talk about your vision, things of this
exactly.
nature.
This is why so many historical great architects have been complete bastards, right? Frank Furness didn't have to do that because he had a gun.
What's the Capone quote? You can get a lot further with a kind word and a gun than with just a kind word.
Yes.
And he didn't do the kind word part, which, if anything, we respect him more for.
Yes. You come to my office and you want to pay me, I'm going to shoot you. You want a building for me? You want to hire my office? You better dance.
This is also our attitude to making podcasts.
Yes.
You want a bonus episode? You get it on the 31st of the month. There's fucking bullets ricocheting off the walls.
So, but there is like also a direct line between Frank Furness and some other very famous architects who were never really expelled from the canon. Mm-hmm. Most notably Louis Sullivan, right?
Alarmingly bald architect.
Yes, he is, invented sort of the aesthetic form of the modern architect. He invented his own unique language of ornament, the Sullivan-esques, right? Another sort of pretty personal style of architecture. He did the Goth Target.
He's like not afraid to get weird with it, which I think you can see the sort of like heritage there.
Yeah, I mean, he got really weird with it, especially with the jewel box banks all through the Midwest.
Yeah.
But Louis Sullivan he worked in Frank Furness's office. He was only kicked out not because he was bad at anything. I mean, he stayed for that 1 week trial, and then Frank gave him another week, and then he was like, "You can stay as long as you want." The only reason he left was because I want to say the Panic of 1873.
It was
all the work dried up.
Yeah, meltdowns.
Hold on, I got the book in front of me. I put a bookmark in here because I knew I was going to reference it.
I've just found here a picture of one of his one of these jewel box banks, which has an enormous mosaic with like sort of lions and shields above the door, which just says in sort of like perfect lettering, thrift, which I really like. This is like good. Long tale of Presbyterianism. We come back to John Fraser after all. When you get down to it, it's all sort of Scottish psychos.
I'll give you the last couple paragraphs here. The offices of Furness and Hewitt occupied the entire top floor of a new brick 4-story building at the northeast corridor of 3rd Street and Chestnut. One day in September, it was very warm. All windows were open for air. The force was wearily at work. As they worked, there came through the open windows a murmur, barely noticed at first. Then this murmur became a roar with wild shouting. Then, to all the windows, Louis saw far below, not pavement and sidewalks, but a solid black mass of frantic men, crowded, jammed from wall to wall. The offices of J. Cook and Company were but a short distance south on 3rd Street. Word came up that J. Cook and Company had just closed its doors. Louis saw it all, as he could see down both Chestnut and 3rd. Chestnut, westward from 3rd, was also a solid mass. The run on the banks had begun. The devastating panic of 1873 was on in its mad career.
To look out of the windows and see that like history is occurring,
Yes.
You know what? History is something that you want to find in a book, not out of your window.
Yes. Louis was shocked and appalled at the sight. He was too young, too inexperienced to understand what it really meant. Even when he was told it was a panic in finance, that credit had crumbled to dust, that men were ruined and insane with despair, that this panic would spread like wildfire over the land, leaving ruin in its wake everywhere. And he still could not understand what had brought it about. The work held steady for a while. There was work on hand which had progressed so far that it must be completed. One day in November, Frank Furness said, "Sullivan, I'm sorry, the jig is up. There'll be no more building. The office is now running dry.
Building's over. Go home.
You've done well, mighty well. I like you. I wish you might stay. But as you were last to come, it is only just that you should be the first to go. With that, he slipped a bill into Louis's hand and wished him farewell and better days. So that was the year of Louis Sullivan working in Frank Furness's office.
Hey, that's not bad, all things considered.
I was about to say, I mean, that's a major progression from the guy just insulting you and then giving you a job.
No, that whole book's really good.
He won him over, you know.
Yeah. So anyway, Louis Sullivan is this very influential architect, and one guy he has in his office, he becomes a very influential architect, and one guy he teaches in his office is Frank Lloyd Wright. I was going to add another picture here. Pretend there's a picture of one of the houses here, I guess. You know, so and Frank Lloyd Wright was like very influenced by Sullivan. So this is sort of the Frank and Louis pattern holds, is all I can say.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we learned, weeb.
Yes.
Yep. And he was he was also Louis Sullivan fired him. So there's that connection too.
That's another connection, yeah.
But he got fired for building houses on the side, not for financial conditions.
Yeah, our next guy, Louis Kahn, actually was tutored under Paul Philippe Krepp, so there's a complete disconnect there.
Meanwhile, the world waits for another Louis.
The world is in the waiting for another Louis. Yes,
bated breath.
Yes, we need another great American architect. We can't keep going with just Frank Gehry.
We should write one of those treatises that has like a long historical precedent for why there must be another Louis to lead us out of architectural chaos and into stability or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good start. We could probably do that. So yeah, that is the greatest architect to ever live, Frank Furness.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have any questions?
How soon can we do about 50 more of these fuckers with like you and June, where we just talk about architects? Because I really enjoyed this one.
Oh hell yeah!
Oh, we're always here to talk about architects. I have to think about who the next guy would be. Maybe Eero Saarinen.
We might as well shoot Eero on my Saarinen until the arch. Yeah.
We talk about who else?
We could just do Frank Lloyd Wright. To be frank, there's enough there.
We could do Frank Lloyd Wright. I don't like Frank Lloyd Wright that much. Is the
even better?
That's the problem. When you talk positively about architects, it means that you're talking positively about architects.
Yeah, that is the thing. Yeah,
I like some Frank guy died at his house.
Yeah. Yeah, find like the worst architects there.
Guts and Borglum.
Well, this is the thing I think about Frank Furness, which is unique among famous architects, is he doesn't seem like he was a bad person.
Right.
Which is like skewering a bunch of guys on the end of a lance when you're like in your 20s will do that to you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, because he's like, he fought a holy war against slavery. And then, what did he do after that? He was like, I hate my clients. They fucking suck. And it's like, this is the attitude you really should have. That shows that you still have some humanity. They tried to suck it out of him in his later days, but I think he kept it.
Zero tolerance for slavers. An iota more tolerance for architecture clients. Yes. But not much.
Not much.
May we all tell our enemies one day to go to hell.
To go to hell, yeah. In a large auditorium. Next live show.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll love it though. So
yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Unless, well,
Wheels.
Frank Furness.
Yeah, we're gonna advertise it as a Red Scare live show and see who shows up. You know.
Yeah, we lure all of our enemies in.
Yes.
To a basement. Perfect.
Yeah.
New World Your Problem live show under this precariously suspended cardboard box.
All right. Well, I think that was a podcast.
That was a podcast.
Yeah.
We gotta, we'll do another bonus episode at some point soon.
That's probably a good idea. Well, I think it's Liam's turn next.
All right, beautiful. I'll get on him to do fashion.
All right.
Well, bye, everyone.
Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Incredible.
That's really good. I had a great time.
Yeah, that turned out pretty good.
I'm so glad.